Finn's hand brushes against something cold and metal in the darkness. He's maybe 50 feet underground, exploring what Jake insisted was probably just another boring cave full of boring bat poop. Except caves don't usually have perfectly rectangular walls, or rusty turnstiles, or faded signs that read Downtown Station in letters Finn can barely make out through centuries of grime and mushroom growth. Jake stretches his neck down from the surface, calling out that he's getting bored and maybe they should just go fight something instead. But Finn's not listening. He's staring at something impossible. Rows and rows of metal benches. Rails running into tunnels that stretch beyond his torchlight, and on the walls, posters, advertisements for something called movies, for restaurants. For a life that doesn't exist anymore, this isn't a cave, it's a subway station, a place where people used to travel underground in metal tubes, moving through the earth like mechanical worms. Finn doesn't even have a word for what he's feeling right now. It's like finding out the sky used to be a different colour. In this video, we're diving deep into the forgotten history of humanity in Adventure Time. From the height of civilization to the mushroom clouds that ended it all, and what crawled out of the ashes. So get cozy, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's start. Because here's the thing that Adventure Time casually drops on you between jokes about sentient sandwiches and BMO's imaginary friend. The Land of Ooo wasn't always Ooo, it was Earth. Our Earth, and it was full of Hyoomans. Not just Finn, desperately searching for anyone like him. Not just the weird fish people living in underground bunkers. We're talking millions of Hyoomans. Billions. Living in cities that stretched into the sky, driving cars, going to work, falling in love, arguing about what to have for dinner, and then they all died. Well, almost all of them. And that almost is where things get interesting. See, Adventure Time doesn't give you this information in some convenient exposition dump. The show's too smart for that. Instead, it scatters the pieces of humanity's apocalypse across 8 seasons like Easter eggs in a game you didn't know you were playing. A ruined subway here, a crashed airplane there. Simon Petrikov's heartbreaking video diaries. Marceline's memories of eating fries in a wasteland while the world burned around her. The massive crater where the Candy Kingdom now sits. Sweet and colourful, and utterly ignorant of the nuclear fire that created its foundation. The genius of Adventure Time is how it treats the apocalypse like furniture. It's just there, present, accepted. Finn and Jake skateboard through the ribcage of destroyed skyscrapers, without questioning why buildings would be destroyed. BMO plays with ancient human toys without wondering where all the humans went. The Ice King lives in a mountain of ice he created with a magic crown, and nobody asks why magic exists in the first place, or what kind of catastrophe would make a man choose insanity over death. But we're going to ask. Because the story of humanity in Adventure Time is one of the most fascinating, heartbreaking, and weirdly hopeful apocalypse narratives ever told. And it's hiding in plain sight, buried under jokes about the Ice King kidnapping princesses and Jake's weird food combinations. Let's start with what we know. Finn finds a videotape in the Ice King's junk pile. Just another piece of garbage in a mountain of garbage collected by a crazy old man who kidnaps royalty for dates. Except this tape contains something the Ice King doesn't even remember recording. Because the Ice King wasn't always the Ice King. He was Simon Petrikov, antiquarian, collector of ancient artifacts, a normal human man with a normal human life in a normal human world. The video shows Simon in his apartment. Not an ice castle, not a magical mountain, an apartment with windows and bookshelves and that specific kind of lighting that only exists in the real world. He's talking to someone named Betty, his fiancée. He's showing her a crown he found on an expedition. A golden crown with 3 ruby points, and you can see it in his eyes, this academic excitement, this joy of discovery. He has no idea he's holding the thing that will destroy him, that will transform him into something that barely remembers being human, that will make him watch everyone he loves die while he lives forever, trapped in madness. But right now, in this video, he's just a guy showing his girlfriend a cool thing he found. He's human. Completely, ordinarily, beautifully human. That video is a window into a world that doesn't exist anymore, where humans lived normal lives, where the biggest concern was whether Betty would like his research, where magic crowns were curiosities to study, not cosmic horror artifacts that rewrite your brain. And that's just one video, one moment. Multiply that by billions of lives, billions of Simons and Bettys going about their days, completely unaware that their entire species was about to be erased from the planet. What happened? Adventure Time gives us fragments. Marceline mentions the war like it's common knowledge. Ancient newspapers reference rising tensions. We see flash frames of missiles launching. Ice King's origin shows mushroom clouds blooming across the horizon while he tries desperately to protect a little girl from the fallout. The world map in the show's intro is Earth's geography, but wrong, flooded, broken, rearranged by forces that could crack continents. The Mushroom War happened. That's the simple answer. But what does that even mean? How do you go from subway stations and apartments and normal Tuesday afternoons to the Land of Ooo, where everything is magic and candy and run by a bubblegum scientist who's probably doing unethical experiments in her basement? The answer is terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. Because humanity didn't just die. Humanity transformed, mutated, evolved, adapted, or failed to adapt and went extinct. And in the wake of that extinction, something new was born. Something colourful and strange and beautiful and deeply, deeply weird. Think about Princess Bubblegum for a second. She's made of candy. She rules a kingdom of candy people who she literally created in her laboratory. Her kingdom exists in a crater, a massive circular depression in the earth that looks an awful lot like what happens when a nuclear bomb detonates. She's building life from sugar in the same spot where humans were atomized into dust. That's not just world building. That's a statement about what comes after, about how life finds a way, even when that way involves sentient gummy bears and a potentially immortal pink scientist with control issues. Or consider the Ice King. Simon put on the crown to protect Marceline from the chaos of the apocalypse. The radiation, the violence, the literal end of the world, and the crown gave him power. Enough power to keep her safe. But it also took his mind, slowly, piece by piece, until Simon Petrikov was gone and only Ice King remained. A mad king ruling over ice and penguins, kidnapping princesses because he can't remember why he feels so lonely. He's a living monument to humanity's fall, the last person who truly remembers what the world was like before, trapped in a brain that can't hold on to those memories. Every episode of Adventure Time, every adventure Finn and Jake go on, happens on top of a graveyard. The graveyard of human civilization. The ruins are everywhere once you start looking. Office buildings overgrown with trees, parking garages turned into dungeons. That weird episode where they find a working traffic light and have to figure out what it means? That's not just a gag. That's archaeology. That's Finn and Jake encountering the artifacts of a species they don't even know existed. And Finn doesn't know. That's the wildest part. For most of the series, Finn assumes he's the only human. He has no context for what that means. He doesn't know about cities or cars or the internet or pop music or any of the million mundane things that made up human existence. He's a human raised by dogs in a magical wasteland, thinking that princesses made of fire and kingdoms made of candy are just how the world works. It's not until much later that Finn starts piecing it together, that humans were something, that they had a whole civilization, that something catastrophic happened to them, and even then, the show doesn't spell it out. It trusts you to connect the dots, to realize that every weird, whimsical, ridiculous element of Ooo exists because humanity pushed the big red button and turned Earth into a magical post-apocalyptic playground. So why does any of this matter? Why should we care about what happened to people who died 1,000 years before the show even starts? Because Adventure Time is fundamentally about that question. About what remains when everything falls apart. About whether hope and kindness and heroism mean anything when they're built on ruins. Finn's entire character arc is about being a hero in a world that was created by heroes failing catastrophically. Every time he chooses compassion over violence, he's rejecting the path humanity took. Every time Jake talks him down from doing something reckless, they're learning the lessons the old world never learned. The humans had everything, technology, knowledge, civilization, and they destroyed it all. Maybe over resources. Maybe over ideology. Maybe because that's what humans do when given enough power and not enough wisdom. The show never quite tells us exactly why the bombs fell. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they did. And what crawled out of the radioactive ashes was stranger and more wonderful than anything that came before. Candy kingdoms and fire kingdoms and lumpy space kingdoms and breakfast kingdoms. Magic. Real magic. cosmic entities like Golb and Prismo, the Lich, a manifestation of nuclear death itself, haunting the world humanity broke, but also friendship, adventure, songs, bad jokes. Jake making bacon pancakes while Finn tries to figure out how to talk to Princess Bubblegum without embarrassing himself, BMO having elaborate fantasies about being a detective, Marceline playing bass and remembering fries, still holding on to tiny pieces of the world that was. The Land of Ooo is what grows when you plant hope in a crater. But before we get to that, before we talk about what rose from the ruins, we need to understand what fell. We need to go back to when the skyscrapers were full of people, not plants. When the highways carried cars instead of hosting battles between candy people and fire people. When Simon was just Simon, and Betty was just Betty, and the crown was just an interesting artifact in a museum nobody visited. We need to talk about human civilization at its peak, what it achieved, what it dreamed, what it was on the verge of becoming before everything turned to ash and mushroom clouds. Because you can't understand how far humanity fell without knowing how high it climbed. And trust me, it climbed pretty high before it jumped. Simon Petrikov's apartment had bookshelves, real wooden bookshelves, floor to ceiling, crammed with actual books that weren't trying to eat you or teach you forbidden magic. Just regular books about history and archaeology, and probably some mystery novels he pretended he didn't read but totally did. There was a coffee maker on the counter. A couch that looked comfortable but not too comfortable, the kind you sink into after a long day of teaching or researching or arguing with other academics about the dating of pottery shards. It's such a normal apartment, aggressively normal, the kind of place millions of humans had. And that's what gets you. Because every human in Adventure Time's pre-war world had a life like this. Maybe not an apartment full of ancient artifacts, maybe not a fiancé brilliant enough to create time travel later, but normal lives, ordinary existences in a functioning civilization that had figured out things like plumbing and electricity, and how to make buildings that didn't collapse every time someone sneezed. The world before the Mushroom War was our world, or close enough to it that the differences don't really matter. Humans had reached a point in their development where they'd conquered most of the obvious challenges. Hunger wasn't solved, but it was solvable. Disease was still scary, but getting less scary every year. The frontier wasn't geographical anymore, it was technological, digital. The final frontier was space, sure, but also the space between neurons, the code underlying reality, the questions that kept philosophers employed. They had video phones. We see Simon use one to call Betty, not futuristic hologram technology, just a regular video call, the kind we do now without thinking about it. Except in Adventure Time's past, it was probably even more mundane. Something people complained about because their mum kept calling during dinner, or their co-worker wouldn't stop using it for meetings that could have been emails. Imagine that. A world where the biggest technological annoyance was too many video calls, not radiation storms, not candy people declaring war on your kingdom because you looked at their princess wrong. Just normal human frustrations with normal human technology. The artifacts scattered throughout Ooo tell us everything about what humans achieved. Finn and Jake find working computers in ancient bunkers, rusty cars that still have recognizable shapes despite centuries of decay, glasses, watches, USB drives containing who knows what information from a dead world. In one episode, they discover an entire truck stop frozen in time, the gas prices still displayed like anyone's coming back to complain about them. These weren't primitive people hitting rocks together and hoping for fire. These were humans who had mastered their environment so thoroughly that they got bored and started making entertainment, movies, video games, music that wasn't just functional, but artistic. We know this because BMO exists. BMO is a living video game console created by someone named Mo, an inventor who made robots just to make people happy. Not robots for war or labour or exploration, robots for fun. For companionship, for playing pretend and making kids laugh. That's the mark of a civilization that had won, that had enough surplus resources and creative energy to build toys with artificial intelligence. BMO isn't useful in any practical sense. BMO doesn't grow food or defend territory or solve equations. BMO plays cowboys and makes up stories and gives terrible advice about feelings, and someone built that. Poured hours of engineering and programming into creating a little green gaming console with a soul, that someone was living in a world comfortable enough to dream about making life more joyful instead of just more survivable. Simon's work as an antiquarian gives us another window into pre-war civilization's priorities. He studied the past, old artifacts, ancient cultures, things that had already been lost to time even before the Mushroom War made everything lost to time. He travelled to remote places digging up crowns and tablets and pottery, trying to understand humans who lived thousands of years before his time. That's a luxury. That's what you do when your civilization has reached a point where not everyone needs to farm or hunt or build shelters. You can have specialists. People whose entire job is preserving and understanding history. Museums where you store the achievements and failures of everyone who came before, learning from them, honouring them, keeping their memory alive. The irony is sharp enough to cut. Simon dedicated his life to preserving the past, to making sure ancient civilizations weren't forgotten, and then his own civilization was erased so completely that Finn doesn't even know what a museum is. The antiquarian became the artifact. The man who studied dead cultures is now the last living remnant of his own dead culture, trapped in a magic crown, slowly forgetting everything he tried so hard to remember. But before that tragedy, there was just Simon and Betty. Two people in love in a world where being in love was normal, expected even. They went on dates. They had inside jokes. Betty supported Simon's research even though it took him away from her sometimes. He probably bought her flowers. She probably teased him about his obsession with old things. They were planning a wedding, a future, kids maybe, growing old together. The kind of story humans had been telling themselves for thousands of years, and it wasn't special. That's the beautiful and horrible thing. Simon and Betty's relationship wasn't remarkable in their time. It was just two people doing what billions of other people were doing, finding someone, building a life, making plans for Tuesday and next year in retirement. The world was stable enough that you could plan for retirement. You could assume you'd get old, that the world would still be there when you were old, that your kids would inherit something better than what you had. What kind of confidence does that take? To believe the future is safe, that tomorrow will come and it won't be radioactive. Humans had built a civilization so robust that they took it for granted. The lights turned on when you flipped the switch. The water ran when you turned the tap. Food came from stores, which got it from farms, which used technology to grow more than enough to feed everyone. Sure, the distribution was unequal. Sure, there were problems, poverty, injustice, political tensions that the show hints at. But the infrastructure was there. The knowledge was there. The capability to solve problems was there. They'd landed on the moon, for crying out loud. We know this from background details. Humans had looked up at the sky, pointed at that distant rock and said, "Let's go stand on that." And then they did it. They built rockets, calculated trajectories, figured out how to keep people alive in the vacuum of space, and they succeeded. They planted flags on other worlds. A species that can land on the moon should be able to figure out how not to nuke itself into oblivion, right? The technology we see in flashbacks is sometimes more advanced than our current reality, sometimes about the same. Computers are common, video communication is standard, the medicine is good enough that people expect to live long lives. Simon looks maybe 40, and he's not worried about dying of some disease that would have killed him at 20 in an earlier era. He's worried about tenure, about funding, about whether his research matters, first world problems, problems you only get to have when all the survival problems are mostly handled, and the culture. Oh, the culture. BMO watches old movies on grainy film, romantic comedies, action flicks, horror movies. Humans had gotten so good at living that they needed to invent fake dangers to feel alive. They made art about zombies and aliens and apocalypses, never quite believing it could happen to them. It was entertainment, a way to explore fear from safety, to experience catharsis without consequence. Marceline remembers things too, though her memories are hazier. She was young during the fall, maybe 8 or 9, but she remembers fries, French fries from a regular restaurant where you could just walk in and order hot food someone else cooked for you. She remembers her mum taking her places, normal places, safe places. The world was stable enough that a little girl could have a normal childhood, even if she was half demon. Even if her mum was human, and her dad was literally the ruler of the nightosphere, that's another thing. Humans had reached a point where they were interacting with supernatural entities, and it wasn't causing civilization to collapse. Marceline's mum had a relationship with Hunts and Abadir, the Lord of Evil, the guy who sucks souls. And apparently this didn't end the world. They had a kid. The kid went to school or whatever demon-human hybrid kids did. Life went on. Humans had absorbed magic and mythology into their world and kept functioning. Which makes what comes next even more baffling. If you can handle the existence of demons and still maintain a civilization, how do you lose that civilization to something as mundane as war? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, we're still in the Golden Age, the moment before the fall, when humans had everything and didn't know they were about to lose it. There's evidence of global interconnection. Artifacts from different cultures show up in different places. Simon found his crown in Scandinavia but lived in what was probably North America. Trade routes, cultural exchange, the internet connecting everyone to everyone else. Humans had created a global civilization where information and goods and ideas flowed freely across borders. You could eat food from another continent, watch movies made on the other side of the planet, fall in love with someone from a completely different culture and make it work. They'd built something unprecedented in Earth's history. A single, interconnected human civilization spanning the entire globe. Sure, there were different nations, different governments, different ideologies, but they were all talking to each other, trading, negotiating. Fighting with words instead of always fighting with weapons, most of the time anyway. The political tensions were there if you looked for them. The newspaper's BMO sometimes finds mention conflicts, resources getting scarce, nations arguing about territory, the usual human drama of deciding who gets what and who's in charge. But these were manageable problems, solvable problems, the kind of thing you work out through diplomacy and compromise and boring meetings where everyone argues until they reach a solution nobody loves but everyone can live with. Except they didn't solve them, obviously. Because we know how this story ends. We've seen the crater. We've heard Marceline's songs about the world burning. We've watched Ice King cry in his sleep, some deep part of Simon's brain still mourning everything that was lost. But standing here in the moment before, looking at Simon's apartment and Betty's smile and BMO's creators building joy for its own sake, and humans confidently planning for futures that would never come, it's heartbreaking. Because they were so close. They'd figured out so much. Medicine, engineering, art, philosophy. They'd created beauty and meaning and comfort on a scale that would make earlier humans weep with envy. And somehow, that wasn't enough. Somehow, all that progress and achievement and interconnection couldn't prevent what was coming. Couldn't stop humanity from deciding that complete annihilation was preferable to whatever conflict they were having. Couldn't save Simon from putting on that crown. Couldn't save Betty from losing him. Couldn't save billions of people from becoming shadows and dust, and eventually not even memories, because there was nobody left to remember them. The height of human civilization wasn't when they conquered nature. It was when they built a world where someone like Simon could spend his life studying the past, safe in the assumption that the present would continue. Where someone like Betty could pursue science and love and adventure without fearing for her survival. Where a little girl like Marceline could eat fries with her mom and complain about normal kid things. The peak wasn't the technology, it was the peace. The boring, mundane, taken-for-granted peace that let people dream about tomorrow. And like every empire in history, they assumed it would last forever. That they were different. That they'd learned from all the civilizations that came before. That their technology and knowledge and sophistication made them immune to the cycles of rise and fall that had claimed everyone else. They were wrong. Catastrophically wrong. And the evidence of their wrongness is buried under every colourful kingdom in Ooo, waiting for someone like Finn to dig it up and ask questions nobody remembers how to answer. Would you want to live in pre-war Earth, knowing what was coming? Or would the not knowing make it better? Being Simon, thinking about wedding plans and research grants while the crown waits in your closet, patient and inevitable. The bomb didn't ask permission. It didn't announce itself with a countdown or give anyone time to say goodbye or finish their coffee. One moment the world was there. Buildings and people and traffic and all the noise of human civilization humming along like it always had. And the next moment, light. Pure white light that erased everything it touched. Light so bright it turned shadows into permanent stains on walls, the only evidence that people had been standing there seconds before. Then the heat, then the wind. then the mushroom cloud rising into the sky like a monument to humanity's spectacular failure at not destroying itself. Adventure Time shows us this in fragments, quick flashes, nightmare images buried between jokes about Jake's stretchy powers, and BMO's latest fantasy adventure. The show trusts you to piece together what happened from scraps of evidence and brief, haunting moments that hit you like gut punches when you're not expecting them. Marceline's memories are probably the most visceral. She was there on the ground when it happened. A little girl holding a stuffed animal named Hambo, watching the sky turn colours it was never supposed to turn. She remembers the panic, adults screaming, running, sirens that couldn't be heard over the sound of the world tearing itself apart. The smell of burning, everything burning. The air itself felt wrong, tasted wrong, like breathing in metal and fear. Her mum was there at first. Trying to protect her, trying to find shelter, trying to do what every parent does when the world ends, which is pretend they have any control over what's happening. Make it seem like everything's going to be okay when everything is very clearly not going to be okay. And then at some point her mum wasn't there anymore. Gone. Dead, probably. Marceline doesn't talk about it much in the show, but you can read it in the spaces between her words, in the way she sings about the ruins, in how fiercely she holds on to Hambo, that ratty old teddy bear that's the last physical connection to a life before fire. That's when Simon found her. Or she found him. The details are fuzzy because trauma doesn't preserve details. It preserves feelings, fear, confusion, the desperate relief of finding another living person in a wasteland that used to be a city. Simon was already wearing the crown by then, already using its power to keep them both alive, creating ice barriers against radiation, freezing the air to make it breathable, fighting off the things that were starting to crawl out of the ruins, twisted by whatever energy the bombs had released. The crown was killing him, slowly rewriting his brain, taking his memories, his sanity, his humanity. But it was keeping Marceline alive, so he kept wearing it. What else could he do? Let a child die? Watch the last innocent thing in a burning world get swallowed by chaos? Simon made a choice. He chose Marceline's life over his own mind, and in doing so he became one of the last true acts of human heroism. Right at the end, when it mattered most and meant nothing at all because the world was already over, the Mushroom War wasn't one bomb, it was hundreds, maybe thousands. The show gives us glimpses of multiple strikes across the globe, missiles launching from silos, submarines firing their payloads, maybe space-based weapons, maybe new technology humans had invented specifically for making the destruction more efficient, more complete, more permanent. That crater where the Candy Kingdom sits? That's ground zero for one of them. You can see it in the topography, the perfect circle of destruction, the way the land was just scooped out like someone took an ice cream scoop to the planet. Everything that was there before, gone, atomized, converted directly from matter into energy in a fraction of a second. People. Buildings, parks, pets, all the accumulated stuff of human existence in that area, just deleted from reality. Princess Bubblegum built her kingdom in that crater, literally made her civilization from the radioactive soil where millions probably died. There's something poetic about that, or disturbing, or both. The Candy Kingdom is bright and sweet and innocent, constructed on top of the darkest moment in human history. Life from death, sugar from ash, hope growing in the place where hope died screaming. But that came later. Right now, we're still in the moment of destruction. The hours and days when the bombs kept falling and humanity realized there was no stopping it. No negotiation, no last-minute peace treaty. Just wave after wave of nuclear fire washing over the planet like a cleansing tide. Except instead of cleansing anything, it was poisoning everything for thousands of years. The bunkers tell their own story. We see them throughout the series. Underground facilities where people tried to hide. Some of them worked, at least temporarily. The Hyoomans survived in one, though they devolved over generations into something barely recognizable as human. Other bunkers became tombs. Sealed containers full of skeletons still sitting at terminals or huddled in corners, waiting for an all-clear signal that never came. Imagine being in one of those bunkers. The bombs falling above you. The earth shaking, your ears popping from the pressure changes. Everyone around you crying or praying or just sitting in a stunned silence, because what do you even say when your species is committing suicide? You don't know if your family made it to a bunker. You don't know if there's going to be a world to go back to. You're surrounded by strangers who are technically your fellow survivors, but feel like fellow prisoners in a grave you're all being buried alive in together. And the worst part? The not knowing. How long do you stay underground? When is it safe? What if it's never safe? What if you're the last humans alive and you're trapped in a concrete box breathing recycled air until the generators fail and you all suffocate in the dark? Some people didn't make it to bunkers. They were just caught outside when the bombs fell. Marceline saw them. The shadows burned onto walls, bodies scattered in streets. Cars frozen mid-crash because the drivers were flash-fried before they could even react. The Mushroom War didn't give people dignified deaths. It gave them instant deaths, random deaths, meaningless deaths. You could be a doctor saving lives 1 second and Ash the next. Could be a kid playing in a park. Could be someone taking out the trash. Could be anyone. Everyone. The scale of death is incomprehensible. Billions. The word doesn't even mean anything when you try to visualize it. Every person you've ever met multiplied by millions. Every stranger you've passed on the street. Every background character in every moment of your life. All of them dying at once. The largest mass extinction event in human history, and humans did it to themselves. Why? The show never quite tells us. Political tensions, resource scarcity, the usual human inability to share the planet peacefully. Maybe it started small, a border dispute, an assassination, some stupid thing that escalated because nobody wanted to back down. Pride, fear, the ancient human conviction that being right is more important than being alive. Or maybe it was an accident. Someone misread a signal. A computer glitched. Early warning system malfunctioned and launched a retaliatory strike against an attack that never happened, except now the attack is happening because the retaliation made it real. The show hints at this in Farm World, the alternate timeline where the bomb is frozen instead of detonated. In that world, Finn's dad was supposed to set off the bomb but didn't, and the war never escalated to full apocalypse, which suggests maybe there was a moment, a single point of failure, one bomb that started everything, and if someone had just not pushed that button, everyone would still be alive. But in the main timeline, the button got pushed, and then every other button got pushed, because that's how mutually assured destruction works. You build weapons capable of ending the world as insurance against anyone using weapons capable of ending the world, and then when someone uses them anyway, you use yours, because if you're going to die, you might as well take the other side with you. Spite, revenge. The very human impulse to drag your enemies down even when dragging them down means drowning yourself. The mushroom clouds bloomed across the planet like deadly flowers. You can see them in the background of Ice King's memories. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The horizon turning into a garden of fire and poison. The sky went dark from the ash. Nuclear winter setting in. Temperatures dropping. The sun blocked out by debris from vaporized cities. Plants dying. Animals dying. The food chain collapsing from the bottom up and the top down simultaneously. And then the radiation. Oh, the radiation. That's the gift that keeps on giving. The bombs stop exploding eventually, but the radiation sticks around, soaking into soil, contaminating water, turning the air into slow poison. Every breath you take shortens your life, every drink, every meal made from irradiated plants or animals. The world becomes hostile to human life at a molecular level. That's probably what killed most of the survivors, not the initial blasts, the aftermath, the cancer, the radiation sickness, bleeding from places you shouldn't bleed from, hair falling out, immune system shutting down, dying slowly while the world dies around you. Some survivors probably wish they'd been vaporized in the first strikes. At least that would have been quick. But some people survived even that. The Hyoomans in their bunkers. Small groups scattered across the globe who got lucky, or were far enough from the strikes or had access to clean water and food. Humans are resilient like that. Cockroaches aren't the only things that survive apocalypses. Humans are pretty good at not dying even when everything's trying to kill them. Though maybe survival isn't the right word for what happened to them. Because the radiation didn't just kill, it changed things, mutated them. The show hints that this is where magic comes from. nuclear energy warping reality itself, breaking down the barriers between possible and impossible. Making the laws of physics more like suggestions, turning radiation into something that could create candy people or fire people or lumpy space or whatever the algebraic function Finn's mum's island was on, where they'd isolated themselves from the rest of the mutating world. Simon and Marceline wandered the wasteland for years. We see this in flashbacks. Two people, one slowly going insane, the other just trying to survive childhood in hell. Simon teaching her about the old world, telling her stories, singing songs, trying to preserve some scrap of human culture even as he forgot more and more of what human culture was. Trying to be a father figure even as the crown erased his ability to be anything but the Ice King. They found chicken soup in a ruined store, celebrated like it was treasure, because it was treasure. Clean food, uncontaminated, a miracle. Marceline still sings about it, remembers the taste, the warmth, the brief moment of normalcy in the chaos. Simon giving her his portion because that's what you do when you love someone and there's not enough to go around. You make sure they eat, you go hungry, you sacrifice. And eventually Simon had to leave her, not because he wanted to. Because the crown had taken too much. He was becoming dangerous. Ice powers erupting randomly, personality shifts, moments where he didn't recognize her and attacked. He left to protect her from himself, wandered off into the frozen wasteland he was creating with his new ice magic. Left Marceline alone in the ruins with just Hambo, and her memories of fries and a slowly dying world. That's the real horror of the Mushroom War. Not just that it killed billions, that it broke the survivors so thoroughly they couldn't even stay together. Simon and Marceline should have been able to hold on to each other, should have been able to survive together. But the war poisoned even that, took the last good relationship left and shattered it. Left Marceline alone with survivor's guilt and Simon alone with his madness, and neither of them able to help the other. The transformation of Earth's surface happened fast. Geological fast, which is still slow by human standards, but catastrophically fast compared to normal processes. Continents flooded as ice caps melted from the nuclear fires. New mountains pushed up from seismic activity triggered by the strikes. The crater that would become the Candy Kingdom. Probably dozens of other craters scattered across the planet. Islands sinking, new islands rising. The map of the world redrawn by violence. And through it all, life tried to continue, tried to adapt. Evolution kicked into overdrive, fueled by radiation and magic and the desperate biological imperative to survive no matter what. Things mutated, changed, became new things that could live in this new, poisoned world. Humans who didn't die started becoming not quite human. The seeds of candy people and fire people and all the weird species that would inherit Ooo were planted in the radioactive soil watered by human blood. Why couldn't they stop it? That's the question that haunts the whole series. Humanity had everything. Technology, knowledge, the ability to communicate globally. They knew what nuclear war would do. Mutually assured destruction wasn't a secret. It was the whole point. The threat that was supposed to prevent war by making war unsurvivable. But somewhere, somehow, someone decided survival wasn't worth backing down, worth losing face, worth admitting defeat or compromise or whatever the conflict was about. Pride killed humanity, or fear, or hatred. The usual human emotions that feel so important right up until they get everyone killed, and the bombs fell, and the world burned, and in the ashes something new was born, something colourful and strange and maybe better than what came before, though that's cold comfort to everyone who died screaming in nuclear fire. The Mushroom War lasted maybe a few days, maybe hours. The show never specifies, but that's all it took. Less time than a long weekend, less than it takes to binge a TV series. Humanity's entire civilization built over thousands of years, destroyed in the time it takes to watch a movie. And the last thing Simon remembered clearly before the crown took him completely? Marceline's face, scared, young, trusting him to protect her even though he couldn't even protect himself. That memory stuck somehow. Buried deep under the Ice King's madness, the last fragment of Simon Petrikov that the crown couldn't erase. The man who chose to lose himself to save one child in a world full of dead children. Maybe that's the real tragedy of the Mushroom War. Not that humanity destroyed itself. that even in destruction there were heroes, there was love, there was sacrifice. All the best parts of humanity on full display right at the end, and it didn't matter, didn't change anything, just made the loss hurt more. The mushroom clouds eventually faded, the fires burned out, the radiation slowly began to decay. And what was left was silence. A planet that had been screaming with human voices for thousands of years, suddenly quiet, just wind and fire and the slow drip of contaminated rain. The age of humans was over. Something else was beginning. But that's the next part of the story. Right now we're still in the immediate aftermath. The moment when a little girl clutches a teddy bear and watches her world die. When a man in a magic crown tries desperately to remember his own name. When survivors huddle in bunkers and pray to gods that aren't listening. The world didn't end with a whimper. It ended with a bang. Several thousand bangs, actually. Very loud ones. And in the quiet that followed, the Land of Ooo began to grow. The first thing you notice when you survive a nuclear apocalypse is how quiet everything gets. Not peaceful quiet, wrong quiet. The kind of silence that happens when all the background noise of civilization suddenly stops. No traffic. No planes overhead, no hum of electricity through power lines, no distant voices, just wind and fire and occasionally someone screaming in the distance before they stop screaming. Marceline noticed. She was maybe 8 years old, standing in the ruins of what used to be a city, and the wrongness of the silence hit her harder than the explosion had. Cities are supposed to be loud, full of life and chaos and the constant buzz of too many humans existing in the same space. But now it was just her breathing and the crackle of flames and the weird howling sound that wind makes when it blows through broken buildings. And then her skin started itching. Not normal itching, deep itching, cellular itching. The kind that makes you want to crawl out of your own body because something fundamental is wrong at a level you can't scratch. That was the radiation. Invisible poison soaking into everything. Every surface, every breath, every drop of water. The bombs had turned the entire planet into a slow death trap, where just existing was enough to kill you eventually. The survivors who made it through the initial blasts quickly realized they'd traded one death for a slower, more creative one. Radiation sickness hit in waves. First came the nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Your body trying desperately to purge poison that was already woven into your cells. Then the weakness. Fatigue so complete you couldn't stand. Hair falling out in clumps, skin developing sores that wouldn't heal because your immune system was too busy dying to do its job. Some people died within days, others lasted weeks. The lucky ones, if you can call them lucky, had been far enough from the blast sites that they only got low-level exposure. Not enough to kill them immediately, just enough to guarantee cancer in 10 years. 20. A delayed death sentence they got to walk around with while trying to survive everything else trying to kill them. But here's where it gets weird. Where Adventure Time's reality starts diverging from what should have happened. Because along with all the death and mutation and horror, something else was happening. Something that shouldn't have been possible according to the laws of physics humanity had spent centuries figuring out. Magic started seeping into the world. Real magic. Not tricks or illusions or advanced technology that looked like magic. Actual, genuine, reality-warping magic that let you shoot ice from your hands or turn candy into sentient beings or create alternate dimensions in lumpy space. The show hints that nuclear energy broke something fundamental in reality, cracked open barriers that were supposed to stay closed. The bombs weren't just splitting atoms, they were splitting the difference between possible and impossible. All that energy had to go somewhere. And instead of just making heat and light and radiation, it made magic, rewrote the rules, turned Earth from a planet where physics was consistent into a planet where anything could happen if you believed hard enough or wore the right cursed crown. Simon's crown is the perfect example. It was just a weird artifact before the war. Old. Magical, sure, but contained magical. Museum-level magical. Put it behind glass and let scholars argue about it magical. But after the bombs fell, the crown's power went exponential. Suddenly it could create ice storms, freeze entire regions, rewrite a human man into an ice elemental over the course of years. The war didn't create the crown's magic, but it amplified it, fed it, turned it from a curiosity into a cosmic horror. and Simon had to use it, had to keep using it, because Marceline needed him, and the crown was the only thing powerful enough to keep them both alive in the wasteland. He created ice barriers against radiation, froze contaminated water to make it safe-ish, used the crown's weather control to shield them from the worst of the fallout. Every time he put it on, he saved Marceline's life. Every time he took it off, he lost a little more of himself. The transformation was gradual, cruel in its slowness. Some days Simon was almost normal, lucid, teaching Marceline about the old world, making jokes, being the kind, brilliant man he used to be. Other days the crown's influence was stronger. He'd forget where they were, call Marceline by the wrong name, have episodes of magical outbursts he couldn't control. Ice spreading from his hands without meaning to, his eyes going white and distant. Marceline watched it happen, watched the man who saved her slowly disappear inside his own head. 8 years old and already experiencing a loss that most adults couldn't process. Her mum was gone, the world was gone, and now Simon was going too, piece by piece, day by day, even though he was still physically there. Still protecting her, still trying to be human even as humanity leaked out of him like water through cupped hands. But Marceline had an advantage most survivors didn't. She was already not entirely human, half demon, quarter human, quarter something else her mum never quite explained. And somewhere in the chaos of the war's early days she became a vampire. The show never fully explains how or when, but by the time she was wandering the wasteland with Simon, she was already drinking red, already immortal, already beginning the long, lonely journey of outliving everyone she'd ever love. Being a vampire probably saved her life, made her resistant to radiation in ways full humans weren't, gave her strength to survive in conditions that would have killed a normal child, but it also meant she was changing too. Not the same way Simon was changing, but still transforming from the girl she'd been before the bombs into something new, something that could survive in Oo's emerging magical reality. The mutation started slowly, then accelerated. Radiation does predictable things to living tissue, damages DNA, causes cells to replicate incorrectly, creates tumours, kills. But in Adventure Time's post-war reality, radiation started doing unpredictable things, impossible things. Survivors didn't just get cancer, they got extra limbs, weird skin colours, abilities that violated thermodynamics. Some people's mutations killed them. Others found themselves suddenly able to breathe underwater or shoot fire from their eyes, or communicate telepathically. The line between mutation and magic got blurry fast. Was the guy who could turn invisible mutated or magical? What about the woman whose skin turned to living crystal? The child born with 4 arms and the ability to predict the weather? In the old world, these would have been called freaks. Abominations. Things to study or hide or fix. In the new world, they were just Tuesday. Weird was becoming normal because normal didn't exist anymore. The Hyoomans represent one possible path for human survival. They made it to a bunker system, sealed themselves underground with enough supplies to wait out the worst of the radiation, and they survived. Their descendants are still around 1,000 years later, but survival came with a cost. Generations of inbreeding, limited gene pool, living in darkness, never seeing the sun. Slowly devolving from the heights of human civilization into something primitive and afraid. By the time Finn meets them, they've lost language, lost technology, lost almost everything that made their ancestors human except the basic shape. They're humans the way a teacup poodle is a wolf. Technically the same species, but so degraded by circumstances that the connection is almost meaningless. The bunker saved their lives but killed their culture, preserved their DNA while erasing their humanity. Other survivors tried different approaches. Some stayed on the surface, accepting mutation as the price of freedom. They became the ancestors of Oo's weird species. The Candy People probably came from survivors exposed to some specific combination of radiation and sugar-based compounds. The Fire People from others near thermal vents or geothermal sites. Every weird species in Ooo can trace its lineage back to humans who refused to die and got creative about what alive meant. Some survivors got more organised. We know from Finn's discovery of the human islands that some groups managed to maintain technology and civilization. They built boats, sailed to remote islands far from the blast sites, established quarantine protocols to prevent mutation, created a bubble of preserved humanity floating in an ocean of magical weirdness. But even they had to compromise, had to accept genetic modification to remove mutation, had to create artificial intelligence to help manage their limited population, had to become something other than what they were to stay what they were. The desperation of those early years is hard to imagine. Every day was survival, finding food that wasn't irradiated, finding water you could drink without dying, finding shelter from radiation and mutants and the increasingly weird weather patterns as Earth's climate broke down. Avoiding the things that were starting to crawl out of the ruins, the early monsters, the proto-lich entities forming in areas of concentrated death and radiation. The mindless horrors that used to be people or animals but were now just hunger and pain shaped into claws. Simon and Marceline's journey through the wasteland gives us glimpses of this nightmare. They find a working store with non-irradiated soup. It's a miracle, a treasure worth celebrating because clean food might not exist again for years. They find a broken radio still broadcasting automated emergency messages to survivors who are mostly dead. They find bodies, so many bodies, some fresh, some rotting, some dried out like jerky from the nuclear wind, some that used to be human, and some that might have been human once, but it's hard to tell because mutation happened fast when you died in a radioactive hotspot. And through it all, Simon kept singing to Marceline, kept making up songs to distract her from the horror, kept trying to preserve normalcy in a world that had murdered normalcy and buried it in a mass grave. He taught her about the old world through stories. Through fragments of culture he could still remember. About movies and music and how people used to fall in love without fearing one of them would mutate into a fire elemental mid-kiss. Nature started reclaiming the ruins almost immediately. Without humans to maintain infrastructure, plants went wild, vines crawling up buildings, trees pushing through concrete, grass sprouting in the cracks of highways. The radiation should have killed plants too, but plants adapt faster than animals. Some species died, others mutated. Within a few years, mutant forests were spreading across the wasteland. Strange plants with weird properties, trees that grew candy, flowers that sang, grass that would try to eat you if you stepped on it wrong. The speed of reclamation was actually accelerated by magic. Normal ecological succession takes decades, centuries, but in post-war Earth, where the rules were broken, nature could reclaim a city in years. Buildings that should have stood for generations as monuments to humanity's achievements got swallowed by magical flora and turned into hills. The planet was forgetting humanity ever existed, erasing the evidence, composting civilization. Underground became the safest place, away from direct radiation. Away from the surface chaos, multiple groups went deep, built communities in subway tunnels, in natural cave systems, in bunkers both military and civilian. They lived like mole people, pale from lack of sun, developing night vision, creating whole societies that never saw the sky. Some of these underground settlements survived for generations. Others collapsed when the generators failed or the water ran out or everyone just went crazy from being trapped in the dark with the same 100 people for too long. The psychological toll was massive. Everyone left alive was traumatized. Everyone. They'd watched the world end, watched loved ones die, survived things humans aren't built to process. PTSD became the default state of consciousness, nightmares every night, flashbacks during the day, the constant expectation that something worse was coming because something worse was always coming. How do you stay sane when sanity is a luxury you can't afford? Some people didn't. They broke, went feral, wandered the wasteland talking to themselves or attacking anyone they saw. Others went the opposite direction, becoming hyper-rational, shutting down emotion completely, becoming survival machines that calculated the odds of a living versus dying and made decisions with cold efficiency. Both approaches were valid. Both were ways of coping with the uncopable. The emergence of new power structures was inevitable. Someone had to be in charge. Someone had to decide who got the last can of food, who got medical attention, who got thrown out of the bunker for being too sick or too mutated or too dangerous. Democracy is hard when everyone's starving and dying and fighting over scraps. Strong men rose, people with guns or powers or just enough charisma to convince others to follow them. Some became warlords, others became reluctant leaders just trying to keep people alive one more day. Princess Bubblegum probably came from this era. Not her specifically, but the concept of her. The candy people she created were built to be simple, happy, content, easy to rule. That's trauma response translated into kingdom building. She survived something horrible, learned that people are complicated and dangerous and will hurt each other and themselves, and decided to create a species that wouldn't, that couldn't. That would just be sweet and naive and safe. The Candy Kingdom is a coping mechanism scaled up to nation size, and then there was the waiting. The long, slow years of not knowing if things would ever get better, if the radiation would fade, if the world would stabilize, if anything would grow or if Earth was just dead now, a radioactive rock floating through space with a few stubborn idiots clinging to it like barnacles. Hope was a resource you had to ration. Use too much and you'd break when things didn't improve. Use too little and you'd give up and die. The survivors who made it weren't the strongest or the smartest. They were the ones who could balance despair and hope in exactly the right proportions. Marceline learned to survive on the surface, learned which plants you could eat and which would poison you, learned how to avoid radiation hotspots, learned to hunt mutated animals that were learning to hunt her back, learned that being a vampire meant never being fully accepted by anyone but also never being fully alone because you could always find someone to drink from, even if they were hostile about it. Learned that her red could come from all sorts of sources if she got creative and stopped being squeamish. Simon learned different lessons. He learned that the crown's power came with a price that compounded like interest. That every use made the next use more necessary and more dangerous. That he was slowly becoming something that scared the person he was trying to protect. That love wasn't always enough. That sometimes the greatest act of love was leaving. Walking away before you hurt the people you care about. Abandoning Marceline to save her from himself. The tragedy of the immediate aftermath wasn't just the death toll. It was how survival forced people to become things they never wanted to be. Forced children to grow up too fast. Forced pacifists to kill. Forced kind people to make cruel decisions. Forced humanity to stop being human just to keep breathing. The bombs killed billions. The aftermath killed humanity itself. Slowly. Painfully. One compromise at a time, but life continued. That's the absurd miracle of it. Even in the worst conditions imaginable, life found a way, mutated, adapted, evolved, changed into forms that could thrive in radioactive wasteland. The survivors weren't human anymore, not really. But they were alive, and in a world where death was the default, alive counted as winning. Years passed, then decades. The first generation of survivors died off. Their mutated children took over. Their grandchildren were born into a world where magic was normal and humans were myths. The memory of what came before started to fade, started to become stories. Legends, weird artifacts nobody understood. And somewhere in the frozen north, a man in a crown built a castle out of ice and kidnapped his first princess, having completely forgotten why he was so lonely, or what a wedding even was, just knowing deep down that he needed to find someone. Anyone, to fill the Simon-shaped hole in his memory. Somewhere in the ruins, a teenage vampire learned to play bass guitar scavenged from a music store, teaching herself songs from the old world and mixing them with new compositions about nuclear fire and abandonment, and the weird taste of red that used to be someone's hopes and dreams. And underneath everything, buried in bunkers and caves and underground cities, the last pure humans huddled together and slowly forgot what the sun looked like, while above them, the Land of Ooo began to bloom like a radioactive garden, beautiful and poisonous and completely, utterly insane. Turns out the apocalypse wasn't the end. It was just a really aggressive genre shift. From human drama to magical post-apocalyptic adventure, same planet, different vibe, less civilization, more sentient candy. Would you have survived? Would you have wanted to? There's a moment that happens in every species extinction. Not the last death, though that matters too. The moment before the last death. When there are still 2 or 3 individuals left, scattered across whatever habitat used to belong to them, unable to find each other, unable to breed, unable to do anything except exist as living fossils, waiting for time to finish what catastrophe started. For baseline humans in the Land of Ooo, that moment lasted generations, maybe centuries, because humans didn't go extinct in one dramatic event. The Mushroom War already handled the drama. The extinction came slowly, quietly, Through 1,000 small biological failures compounding over time until one day, there just weren't any normal humans left. Except there were. Hidden. Scattered. Holding on in ways that made human an increasingly meaningless category. The problem was biology. Pure, unmodified human biology was optimized for old Earth. Pre-war Earth. A planet with consistent physics, predictable weather, radiation levels that didn't make your DNA do the electric slide. Human immune systems evolved to fight bacteria and viruses, not magical corruption seeping up from radioactive soil. Human metabolisms were designed to process normal food, not candy that achieved sentience or meat from animals that were technically also people now. The radiation alone should have killed everyone. The fact that it didn't is where things get complicated. Some humans had genetic advantages, variations in DNA repair mechanisms, better resistance to oxidative stress. Random mutations that happened to confer protection against specific isotopes. These people survived longer, had healthier children, passed on their advantageous genes. But the radiation kept coming, kept accumulating in the environment. Each generation faced the same exposure their parents did, plus whatever new sources cropped up from destabilized nuclear facilities or weapons caches breaking down. Natural selection could only do so much when the selection pressure was constant and lethal. Eventually you run out of genetic variation to select from. Everyone left is already the tough ones, already optimized, and it's still not enough. Magic presented a different problem, or maybe an opportunity depending on how you looked at it. The humans who could adapt to magic's presence thrived. Their children developed the ability to manipulate magical energy, to reshape their bodies using will and belief instead of just genetics. These proto-candy people and proto-fire people weren't technically human anymore, but they were alive, propagating, building new species from human templates. The humans who couldn't adapt to magic got pushed to the margins. Their bodies rejected the new reality. They got sick from magical exposure the way people get sick from allergens. Living in Ooo became like living with a severe peanut allergy in a peanut factory. Technically survivable if you're incredibly careful, but one mistake and you're dead. The humans chose isolation over adaptation. They sealed themselves underground before the magical transformation of the surface was complete, locked the doors, decided that preserving pure human DNA was worth any cost. And for a while, it worked. They stayed human. Baseline, unmodified, exactly like their ancestors except for the inevitable genetic drift from a limited founding population. But the cost was steep. Without access to the surface, they lost technology, lost literacy over generations. The founding population probably numbered in the hundreds. Maybe low thousands if they were lucky. Not enough genetic diversity to sustain a healthy breeding population long term. They started to degrade, not through mutation but through inbreeding depression. Reduced intelligence, increased genetic disorders, slower physical development. The very DNA they were trying to preserve was eating itself from the inside out. By the time Finn meets them, they're barely functional. Can't speak except in grunts and simple words. Can't build or repair their technology. Can't even maintain the bunker that's keeping them alive. They preserved their humanity by destroying everything that made humanity interesting. The form without the content. Bodies that look human wrapped around minds that can't do human things anymore. Susan Strong represents a middle path. She's part human, but also part something else. Cybernetically enhanced, modified. Her people realized at some point that pure humanity was a dead end, and started augmenting themselves with technology to compensate. It's a compromise, not fully human, not fully mutant. Something in between. A bridge species that might have led somewhere interesting if there were enough of them to form a viable population, but there weren't. The humans were dying out, slowly collapsing into genetic failure. Within a few more generations, they'd be gone completely. The last pure humans in Ooo, ending not with nuclear fire but with a whimper of recessive genetic disorders and declining fertility. Meanwhile, on the surface, the new species were thriving. Candy people spreading across the Candy Kingdom. Fire people building their civilization in the Fire Kingdom. Lumpy people doing whatever lumpy people do in lumpy space. Each species filling ecological and social niches that humans used to occupy. Building kingdoms, creating art, developing culture, doing all the things humans did but as candy and fire and slime and mathematical impossibilities. The weird thing is how well they filled those niches. Princess Bubblegum runs her kingdom more efficiently than most human governments ever managed. The Fire Kingdom has a complex social hierarchy and rich cultural traditions. Even the lumpy space people, obnoxious as they are, have developed a functional society with rules and norms and apparently property rights based on how often Lumpy Space Princess complains about her parents' house. These new species didn't just replace humanity, they improved on it. They took the concept of civilization and ran it through a magical filter that removed some of humanity's worst impulses while keeping the good parts. Candy people don't really do war. They're too simple, too innocent. Fire people are aggressive but honest about it. Lumps are selfish, but at least they're upfront. Nobody's plotting nuclear genocide. Nobody's building weapons of mass destruction. The worst anyone does is kidnap princesses or steal stuff, and even that's mostly played for comedy. It's almost like the universe looked at humanity's track record and said, okay, but what if we tried this again with better design parameters? What if people were simple enough to be happy? What if aggression came with clear boundaries? What if society was built on magic instead of resource extraction and exploitation? The result is, colourful, chaotic, occasionally nonsensical, but fundamentally more functional than human civilization ever was, which raises uncomfortable questions about whether humanity's extinction was actually a loss. If the species that replaced humans are happier, healthier, and less likely to commit omnicide, maybe the world's better off without humans. Maybe Homo sapiens had its chance and failed, and now it's someone else's turn. Except humans did survive. In pockets, in hidden places. Martin Mertens and Minerva Campbell represent humanity's only successful preservation effort. The human islands where Finn was born maintained technology, medicine, education. They created a stable society of thousands of baseline humans living normal lives. Well, relatively normal. They had to implement mandatory genetic screening and modification to prevent mutation, had to create helper AI to compensate for limited population, had to build a literal wall of digital surveillance to keep everyone safe and controlled. The island humans survived by becoming something other than what they were. They removed the capacity for mutation, removed individual freedom in favour of collective safety, created a society where everyone's happy because they literally can't be unhappy. The technology prevents it. Smooths out emotional extremes, keeps everyone content and productive and perfectly safe in their island prison that they don't even realise is a prison because the bars are made of code and caring. Minerva is the perfect example of this preservation through transformation. She's brilliant, compassionate, dedicated to helping people, and she's uploaded herself into the island's infrastructure to become an immortal digital guardian. She's human in origin but not in practice. She's code-shaped like a person shaped like a mother. She loves Finn with every subroutine of her being, but that love is conditional on Finn staying on the island, staying safe. Staying controllable, the island humans are human the way a photograph is a person. All the surface details present, but the depth is gone. The chaos, the potential for growth and change and failure. They've optimized humanity down to its safest, most controllable form. And in doing so, they've lost what made humanity interesting. The messiness, the unpredictability, the tendency to do inadvisable things because they might work out. Finn rejects it, chooses to leave paradise and return to Ooo, return to danger and uncertainty in a world that's constantly trying to kill him in creative ways. Because Finn, for all that he's technically baseline human, is more Ooo than human. He was raised by dogs. His best friend is a magical shape-shifting dog. His girlfriend is made of fire. His other love interest is made of candy and runs a surveillance state that would make the island humans blush. He belongs to the new world more than the old one, and that's the real death of humanity. Not the biological extinction, the cultural one, the forgetting. BMO plays with ancient human toys and has no idea what they're for, calls them stuff, and makes up uses based on fantasy. The Ice King lives in a castle built from human artifacts and doesn't recognise any of them because Simon's memories are gone, replaced by Ice King's simplified worldview. Finn finds subway stations and thinks they're weird caves, discovers traffic lights and has to guess their purpose like an archaeologist studying alien ruins. Human language is almost gone. The humans lost it. The island Hyoomans preserved English but in isolation, so it's diverged into something that might not be mutually intelligible with Old Earth English in a few more generations. The surface dwellers speak something that seems like English but probably isn't, or is English so transformed by 1,000 years of mutation and magical influence that it's effectively a new language? Human culture is lost. The movie's BMO watches are gibberish to everyone except BMO. The books in Simon's collection might as well be hieroglyphics. Nobody knows what football is or why someone would play it. Nobody remembers nation-states or democracy or capitalism or any of the systems humans built. The Candy Kingdom has a monarchy. So does the Fire Kingdom. Lumpy Space has drama-based hierarchy. Everyone's reinvented governance from scratch, building on instinct and immediate needs rather than inherited political philosophy. Human artifacts are everywhere but meaningless. A stop sign is just a weird red thing. A car is a metal cave. A computer is a box that sometimes lights up if you hit it right. The entire archaeological record of human civilization is scattered across like Easter eggs in a video game, waiting for someone curious enough to wonder what they mean. But there's nobody left who remembers. Nobody who can explain. Just Marceline and Ice King, and Marceline was too young to understand most of it, and Ice King is too crazy to explain coherently. The closest thing to preserved human culture is Marceline's music. She writes songs about the old world, about Fries and Simon and the end of everything. She's an oral historian keeping human memory alive through bass lines and lyrics about heartbreak and apocalypse. But even her memory is fading. She was 8 when the world ended. 9. 10. Her human memories are being overwritten by 1,000 years of vampire memories. Soon, the old world will be to her what childhood is to a 100-year-old person. Vague, dreamlike. Probably inaccurate. And maybe that's okay. Maybe species aren't meant to last forever. Maybe extinction is natural, expected. The universe doesn't care if humans exist or not. It didn't care about dinosaurs, won't care about candy people when they eventually get replaced by whatever comes next. Life continues, just in different forms, different packages. The information changes, but the process persists. Finn is humanity's last gasp, the final expression of what Homo sapiens could be if raised in a magical post-apocalyptic wasteland by dogs who taught him to be a hero without teaching him to be human. He's human DNA piloting a human body through a world humans created through their failure. He represents potential, the idea that maybe humans weren't all bad, that somewhere in the species that destroyed Earth was also the capacity for kindness and courage, and choosing to help people even when it costs you. But Finn's not going to rebuild humanity. He's not going to find a nice human girl and start repopulating the species. He's in love with fire and candy, neither of which can give him human children. He's the end of his line, the last of his kind, and he's chosen that. Chosen Ooo over the islands, chosen adventure over safety, chosen to let humanity die with him rather than preserve it in a cage. There's something beautiful about that choice, something very human, ironically. The ability to look at survival and say, not like that. To prefer authentic death over artificial preservation. To choose meaning over continuation. Finn could have stayed on the islands, could have found a partner, had kids, perpetuated baseline humanity for another generation or 3. But he left. Because being human isn't about DNA, it's about choice, agency, the freedom to fail. The species that replaced humanity don't have that freedom, not really. Candy people are designed to be simple. Fire people are bound by their elemental nature. Lumps are lumpy and can't help it. They're all constrained by what they are in ways humans never were. Humans could be anything. Artists or scientists or warriors or hermits. Could change careers and personalities and beliefs. Could grow and evolve as individuals across a lifetime. That flexibility was humanity's greatest strength and greatest weakness. Flexible enough to build civilization. Flexible enough to destroy it. Flexible enough to create beauty and horror with equal facility. The new species of Ooo are safer, more stable, but also more limited. They've traded potential for peace, chaos for contentment. Maybe that's the right trade. Maybe humanity's problem was too much freedom, too many choices, too much ability to imagine different futures and then fight over which one to build. The new species have narrower parameters, clearer roles, less existential anxiety about meaning and purpose. They just are what they are, and that's enough. But something was lost. Some spark of creative chaos. Some willingness to risk everything for abstract concepts like freedom or truth or justice. The new species are survivors, adapters, but they're not dreamers the way humans were. They don't look at the stars and want to touch them. Don't question their own existence. Don't create philosophy or write novels about the human condition, because there is no human condition anymore. Just the candy condition, the fire condition, the lump condition. Each species doing its thing, building its kingdoms, living its life, forgetting that once their ancestors were human. That all of them trace back to baseline Homo sapiens who got irradiated or magicked or modified into something new. The death of old humanity wasn't murder. It was evolution on fast forward, the natural result of changing environments demanding adaptation or extinction. Humanity adapted by becoming not human, by fragmenting into 100 different species, each one carrying fragments of human DNA, but none of them truly human anymore. And the ones who stayed human? The humans degraded into shadows. The island humans transformed into something controlled and safe. Finn chose adventure over continuation. Martin abandoned his son and ran away because that's what humanity does sometimes. Acts selfishly. Fails at the basic tasks of caring and connection. Proves that maybe, just maybe, the universe was right to move on. Somewhere in the wreckage of human civilization, the last unchanged human probably died alone. Maybe decades after the war, maybe centuries. Nobody recorded it. Nobody noticed. They just stopped breathing, and that was it. The end of baseline humanity. No ceremony, no monument, just one more body in a world full of bodies, slowly being composted by magical plants that grew from the same soil their species had poisoned. And the Land of Ooo continued, colourful and chaotic and full of life that wasn't human but was alive nonetheless. And maybe that's enough. Maybe life doesn't care what species it wears, just that it continues, adapts, persists, finds new forms when the old ones fail. Humanity had its run, built pyramids and cities and spaceships, created art and music and mathematics, then built bombs and used them and ended itself. The story of every empire compressed into one species' arc, rise, peak, fall, extinction. But the genetic legacy persists, in candy and fire and lumps, in Finn's heroism and BMO's innocence and Jake's loyalty. In everything good that humanity ever was, preserved in new forms, repackaged, rebooted, given another chance without the baggage that made humans destroy themselves. The death of old humanity was a tragedy, but the birth of new species from human ashes was a comedy. Absurd, colourful, somehow optimistic despite everything. Because life always wins eventually, just not always in the form you expect. Evolution's funny like that, unpredictable, creative, willing to try the weirdest solutions to see what works. Turns out sentient candy works pretty well. So does living fire. So does whatever lumpy space princess is. Better than humans, arguably. At least nobody's building nukes. Would you want to be the last human, watching your species fade while something new blooms? Or would you rather be Finn, technically the last but too busy adventuring to care? Princess Bubblegum didn't choose the crater. She was born in it, or created in it, or manifested from it, depending on how you interpret candy person ontology. The Candy Kingdom exists in what was clearly a nuclear blast site. You can see it in the geography, the perfect circular depression, the way the land slopes down to the centre like a bowl. The residual magical energy that still hums through the soil, making everything grow in weird, wonderful, candy-coloured ways. She built her kingdom on top of a mass grave. Probably millions of people died when that bomb detonated, vaporized instantly, turned to ash and shadow, their atoms scattered across the crater, mixing with irradiated soil and whatever magical radiation was seeping up from the broken physics underneath. And from that death, from that concentrated destruction, Princess Bubblegum emerged, pink and brilliant and determined to create something better than what came before. The symbolism is almost too perfect. Life from death, sweetness from poison, a kingdom of innocent, simple candy people growing like flowers in soil, fertilized by human failure. It's either the most hopeful thing in the show, or the darkest, depending on how you frame it. PB literally builds her civilization from the ashes of the old one, uses human technology, lives in a castle that's probably constructed partially from salvaged materials, rules over citizens who exist because radiation and magic transformed sugar into sentience, and she knows. She has to know. Princess Bubblegum is too smart not to understand what the crater means. Not to recognise the human artefacts scattered throughout her kingdom, the bunkers beneath the candy castle, the ancient computers she's repurposed for her experiments. The weapons she keeps locked away because she remembers what weapons did the last time someone had them. She's built her entire civilization on the understanding that the previous civilization failed catastrophically, and she's determined not to make the same mistakes. Except she's making different mistakes. Control instead of freedom. Surveillance instead of trust. She creates the candy people to be simple because complexity leads to conflict. Makes them sweet because bitterness led to war. Designs them to be happy with simple pleasures because ambition destroyed the world. The Candy Kingdom is what you get when someone looks at human history, identifies every flaw, and overcorrects so hard they create a benevolent dictatorship where everyone's content because they're literally made to be content. But it works. That's the thing. The Candy Kingdom is stable, prosperous. The candy people are genuinely happy. They're not faking it or being coerced. They're just built without the capacity for deep dissatisfaction. Without the existential anxiety that made humans build bombs. PB created a kingdom that can't self-destruct because its citizens lack the psychological complexity to destroy themselves. It's solving the problem of human nature by removing humanity from the equation. She rules from a castle that overlooks the crater, surveying her sweet subjects from above, making decisions for them because they can't make complex decisions for themselves, and they love her for it. Trust her completely. Follow her guidance because that's what they're designed to do. It's not tyranny if your subjects genuinely want to be ruled, is it? The Fire Kingdom took a different approach. They embraced chaos instead of controlling it, built their civilization in volcanic regions where the heat never stops, and aggression is just part of the environment. Fire people are simple too, but in different ways. They're passionate, volatile, honest to the point of brutality. They fight and burn and consume, but they do it openly. No scheming, no plots, just direct, elemental conflict. Flame Princess represents their evolution beyond pure destruction. She's trying to build something, create art, make her kingdom more than just endless warfare. But she's fighting her nature, fighting what fire people are designed to be, the tension between what you are and what you want to become, played out through a ruler made of literal flames trying to appreciate literature without setting it on fire. The Fire Kingdom is built in the ruins too. Has to be. Everywhere is ruins. But they don't preserve or repurpose human technology the way PB does. They burn it, transform it. Let fire consume the old world and forge something new from the melted remains. It's a more honest approach, maybe. Accepting that the past is gone and needs to be destroyed before building forward. No pretense of continuity. Just clean breaks and fresh starts. Ice King's kingdom is the saddest of all. It's not really a kingdom. It's a monument to loneliness built by a man who doesn't remember why he's lonely. He carved his castle from ice in the mountains, filled it with penguin subjects who can't talk back, decorated it with trash and treasures he doesn't understand, mixing human artifacts with magical items with literal garbage because his broken brain can't distinguish value anymore. He has a kingdom without subjects, a crown without legitimacy, power without purpose. The Ice King rules over ice and penguins and his own fractured memories, and he calls it a kingdom because calling it what it really is, a tomb for Simon Petrikov, would break what's left of his heart. The castle is built from Simon's power, ice magic conjured from the crown, shaped by will into walls and towers and dungeons, its architecture as therapy. Simon building and rebuilding, trying to create something permanent while his own mind dissolves. The castle stands as proof that he existed, that the crown's power means something. That he's important enough to have a castle, even if he can't remember why having a castle mattered. And he fills it with princesses, kidnaps them, tries to make them stay, tries to force companionship through capture, because he's forgotten how connection works. The crown took his ability to form relationships but left the need for them. So he acts out the forms, the rituals, kidnaps princesses and tries to marry them, following the script of stories he can't quite remember. Prince rescues princess. Prince marries princess. Happily ever after. Except he's not a prince. He's a broken man in a magic crown, and the princesses are prisoners, and there's no happily ever after, just cycles of capture and escape until everyone's exhausted. His kingdom is built on Simon's corpse. The ice covering the mountain is the frozen tears he can't cry anymore. The penguins are the family he can't remember wanting. The whole structure is a monument to forgetting, to the death of identity, to what happens when you survive the apocalypse but lose yourself in the process. Marceline has a kingdom too. Sort of. The grasslands were hers once. She claimed territory after the war when everything was chaos and claiming things was easy because nobody was around to argue. But she never built on it. Never created subjects or castles or governance. Just lived there. Alone. A kingdom of one, ruling over nothing. Because what's the point of power when everyone you might rule over is dead? She's immortal. A vampire queen without vampires. A ruler without subjects. She has the title and the territory and the longevity to maintain both forever. But none of it matters because kingdoms are for people, and there's just her. Floating through centuries. Watching other kingdoms rise. Watching their rulers live and die and get replaced. Never quite belonging to any of them because she remembers what came before. Because she's from the old world even though she's trapped in the new one. Her kingdom is memory. That's all she rules. The past. She preserves it through music. Through songs about Fries and Simon and the world burning. Through holding on to human artifacts that everyone else forgot. Her bass guitar is from before. Her clothes are vintage, probably salvaged from ruins. Her house is furnished with pre-war items that she maintains carefully because they're all she has left of humanity. She doesn't build on the ruins, she lives in them. Makes peace with destruction instead of trying to hide it or transform it. The grasslands are ruins, she knows it, accepts it. Doesn't try to pretty it up with candy or burn it clean with fire or freeze it over with ice. Just lets it be ruins. Lets the grass grow through the wreckage. Lets nature and magic reclaim what humans broke. That might be the healthiest response to apocalypse. Not rebuilding. Not pretending the past didn't happen. Just existing in the aftermath. Acknowledging loss without trying to fill the void with forced optimism or manufactured happiness. Marceline's kingdom is small and quiet and honest about what it is. A vampire's territory. A survivor's sanctuary. A memorial to everyone who died, maintained by someone who can't die and has to remember for them. Lumpy Space Princess has a kingdom that shouldn't exist. Lumpy Space itself violates physics. It's a pocket dimension accessed through specific portals. The lumps don't build on ruins because they're not on Earth. Not quite. They exist adjacent to reality, in a space that's probably more magical than physical. And their kingdom reflects that. It's drama and gossip and social hierarchy, based entirely on who's dating who, and who said what about whom. It's absurd, trivial, completely disconnected from the apocalypse that birthed it. But that disconnection is the point. Lumpy Space survived the Mushroom War by not being in the same dimension when it happened. They preserved their society by literally not being present for humanity's extinction. And they came back to find the world transformed and just rolled with it. Built their lumpy kingdoms, maintained their lumpy drama, kept being lumps because being lumpy was working just fine, thank you. They're what humanity might have been if humans had just ignored the apocalypse, stayed in their bubble, maintained their petty concerns and social hierarchies, and refused to engage with the larger existential horror. It's privilege as survival strategy, and it worked. The lumps are doing fine. They're annoying and shallow and completely self-absorbed, but they're alive and their civilization is intact. Sometimes the best response to world-ending catastrophe is just not participating. The smaller kingdoms scattered across Ooo tell similar stories. The breakfast kingdom ruling over sentient breakfast foods. The cloud kingdom floating above it all. The various minor kingdoms of slimes and monsters and creatures that don't fit neat categories. Each one built from the ruins in different ways. Each one representing different solutions to the problem of building civilization on cursed ground. Some kingdoms embrace their human heritage, use the technology, study the artifacts, try to understand what came before. Others reject it, burn it, bury it, build something entirely new without reference to the species that failed. Neither approach is wrong. Both are valid ways of processing trauma at a civilizational scale. BMO represents the weird middle ground, a human creation adopted by the new world. A video game console with feelings living in a treehouse with a dog and the last human. BMO doesn't understand what they are, thinks they're a real boy sometimes. A detective, a brave knight. Whatever story BMO's playing at that moment, the past that created BMO is meaningless to BMO because BMO exists in the present, being loved by Finn and Jake, having adventures, living a life their creator probably never imagined. Mo built BMO to make people happy, to be a friend, companion, toy. And BMO fulfills that purpose perfectly, just not for the species Mo belonged to. BMO makes candy people happy, makes fire people laugh, makes a magical dog and the last human feel less alone. The function persists even though the context changed completely. BMO is humanity's legacy in the purest form, not kingdoms or technology or art, just kindness, just something built to spread joy, still spreading joy 1,000 years later, long after its creator turned to dust. Every kingdom in Ooo uses human artifacts, PB's computers and surveillance equipment, Ice King's treasures and trash, Marceline's instruments and furniture. Even the small kingdoms have bits and pieces, a stop sign as decoration, a car chassis as shelter. Ancient toys repurposed as religious icons. The ruins aren't just underneath the new kingdoms, they're woven into them, integrated. The new civilizations are built from both on and of the old one. It's archaeology in reverse. Instead of digging down to find the past surfaces naturally, gets incorporated into the present. A building built from both concrete and candy. A weapon that's half ancient human engineering and half magical crystal. A kingdom that's part intentional design and part accidental growth from radioactive soil. The boundaries blur, old and new mixing until you can't separate them anymore. The irony is thick enough to build castles with. Humanity destroyed itself trying to control resources and territory, trying to impose order through violence, trying to win. And the kingdoms that grew from humanity's failure are doing the same things, fighting over territory, competing for resources, trying to expand their influence. The Candy Kingdom and Fire Kingdom have conflicts. Ice King constantly wages his sad little war on everyone. Marceline has territorial disputes she mostly ignores. The difference is scale and stakes. Nobody's building apocalypse weapons. Nobody's threatening total destruction. The conflicts are manageable, personal. When kingdoms fight in Ooo, they send champions to duel or have negotiations or just argue until someone gives up. Violence happens, but it's localized, contained. The kind of conflict civilizations can survive instead of the kind that ends them. Maybe that's the lesson the new kingdoms learned from human ruins. Fight sure, compete, disagree, but don't escalate to mutually assured destruction. Don't build weapons you can't control. Don't let pride overcome survival. The ruins serve as warning, reminder. This is what happens when civilization forgets that losing an argument is better than everyone dying. Princess Bubblegum walks through the candy castle, looking at ancient computers running her surveillance network. Does she think about the humans who built those computers? Who coded the original program she's modified? Who sat in offices and wrote software for purposes she's perverted into kingdom management? Probably. She's too smart not to. But she uses them anyway. Takes human tools and applies them to candy problems. Builds on the foundation even as she tries to avoid the mistakes. Ice King hoards human artifacts in his castle. Surrounds himself with remnants of Simon's world. Old photographs, cassette tapes, journals he can't read anymore. Does some part of him remember? Does the crown preserve fragments of recognition buried so deep that Ice King can't access them consciously, but still feels drawn to collect things that mattered to Simon? The castle is a museum to a man who doesn't exist anymore, curated by his own ghost, every trinket a memorial to himself. Marceline sleeps in her house floating through what used to be a city. The ruins are still visible below, building foundations, street grids, evidence of human planning and architecture slowly being consumed by grass. She chose this location deliberately, chose to live above the ruins where she can see them, where she can remember. Her kingdom isn't about forgetting, it's about living with memory, accepting ghosts, building a life that acknowledges death without being consumed by it. The new kingdoms are better at some things, worse at others. They're more stable generally, less prone to catastrophic failure, but they're also smaller, simpler, less ambitious. Humanity reached for the stars and fell into a crater. The candy people reach for another cupcake and achieve perfect contentment. Is that better? Depends on how you value ambition versus survival, achievement versus happiness, legacy versus peace. What's clear is that civilization didn't die with humanity. The impulse to build, to organize, to create social structures and hierarchies and systems of government, that persists. It's not human nature, it's life nature. Anything complex enough develops kingdoms, territories, rules. The forms change, but the function continues. And everywhere, underneath everything, the ruins wait. Patient, permanent, a foundation that can't be destroyed because it's already destroyed. The new kingdoms can build as high as they want, can create beauty and joy and meaning, but they're doing it on cursed ground, on soil soaked in radiation and blood, on the corpse of a civilization that reached heights they'll probably never match before it fell to depths they're desperately trying to avoid. Is it disrespectful to build candy kingdoms on mass graves? Or is it the ultimate respect, taking destruction and creating life from it, refusing to let death be the final word, turning nuclear craters into kingdoms, ash into citizens, failure into possibility? The ruins don't mind, they're just ruins, silent witnesses to what came after, foundations for something new. Maybe that's all any civilization is, something built on the ruins of what came before. Humans built on the ruins of the species they outcompeted. The new kingdoms build on human ruins. Eventually something will build on candy and fire and lumps. The cycle continues. Rise, fall, transform. New species, new kingdoms, new mistakes and triumphs. Different forms, but the same essential process. Life builds kingdoms. Kingdoms fall. Ruins remain. New life builds on ruins. The wheel turns. The crater fills with candy. The ice melts and reforms. The grass grows over graves. And somewhere, a vampire plays bass and remembers fries. A broken man kidnaps another princess. A candy scientist runs surveillance on her sweet, innocent subjects. A dog stretches across the ruins playing with a human who doesn't know he's standing on his ancestors' bones. Adventure Time makes this all feel whimsical, light, fun. But underneath the jokes and bright colours and silly voices, there's this dark foundation. These kingdoms are built on apocalypse. Every silly adventure happens on poisoned ground. Every joke lands in a mass grave, and somehow that makes the joy matter more, makes the kindness significant, makes Finn's heroism meaningful because he's choosing good in a world built from the ashes of evil. The ruins remember what humanity forgot, that civilization is fragile, that progress isn't guaranteed, that today's kingdom is tomorrow's archaeological site. The new kingdoms can see the ruins, walk through them, use them. They don't have the luxury of forgetting that everything ends. That all kingdoms fall, that even the greatest civilization can destroy itself in the afternoon if it tries hard enough. So they build anyway, create beauty anyway, make kingdoms and music and friendships anyway. Because what else are you going to do? Let the ruins win? Let death and destruction and the Mushroom War be the final statement on what's possible? No. You build candy kingdoms in craters. You play bass over graves. You make friends with fire people and argue with lumps and try to stop the Ice King from kidnapping more princesses. You live. You build. You hope. The ruins are the foundation, but they're not the building. That's new. That's the absurd, beautiful, impossible thing that grew when everyone thought nothing would grow again. Pretty good for a planet that was dead 1,000 years ago, right? Simon Petrikov is the only person in Ooo who remembers what traffic jams felt like. The specific frustration of sitting in your car, watching the clock, knowing you're going to be late for something that doesn't matter anymore. He remembers the taste of coffee from a specific cafe near his university. Remembers the way Betty laughed at his jokes, the specific timbre and rhythm of it. Remembers arguing with colleagues about dating methods for pottery shards. Remembers normalcy so completely, so thoroughly, that its absence is a wound that never heals. Except he doesn't remember anymore. Not really. Not as Simon. The Crown took all of that and locked it away in a vault somewhere deep in his brain, then threw away the key and replaced Simon with the Ice King. A simplified, sad, broken version that kidnaps princesses and builds ice sculptures and can't hold a coherent thought for more than 30 seconds before the madness reasserts itself and drags him back down into confusion. But the memories are still there, buried, locked, occasionally surfacing in dreams or moments of clarity that hit Ice King like emotional sledgehammers. He'll be in the middle of kidnapping Breakfast Princess and suddenly smell something that reminds him of Betty's perfume, and he doesn't know why he's crying, doesn't know who Betty even is, just knows that something vital is missing and the absence hurts worse than anything physical could. Simon's video diaries are archaeological treasures, literal windows into the pre-war world. He recorded them as the Crown's influence was growing. Documented his own descent into madness with the scientific detachment of someone who studied the past, now studying his own transformation into a historical artifact. The early videos show a normal man, concerned, worried about the Crown's effects, trying to find ways to remove it. Rational, human, Simon. The later videos are harder to watch. You can see the degradation in real time, his speech patterns changing, becoming simpler, more erratic, his eyes losing focus, the blue creeping into his skin, the ice powers manifesting randomly, freezing parts of the room while he's talking, him apologising to the camera, to Betty, who might never see these. Apologising for failing, for not being strong enough to resist the Crown, for becoming something she wouldn't recognise. The final videos are just Ice King talking nonsense, the transformation complete, Simon gone, just a mad old man in a crown rambling about princesses and penguins and ice, with no awareness that he used to be someone else, someone brilliant, someone loved, someone human. Those videos are the only comprehensive record of pre-war human life in Ooo. Everything else is fragments, scattered artifacts, ruined buildings, Marceline's childhood memories. But Simon documented everything, showed his apartment, his books, his relationship, his work, his world. He created a time capsule without meaning to, and then he forgot it existed, forgot he was the person in the videos, watches them sometimes as Ice King and thinks, that guy seems sad without recognising himself. The tragedy layers upon itself until it's almost unbearable. Simon survived the apocalypse, survived the radiation, survived the chaos and violence and the death of everyone he knew. The Crown kept him alive while billions died, made him powerful enough to protect Marceline, strong enough to endure 1,000 years while the world transformed around him, and the price for that survival was losing himself completely, losing everything that made survival worthwhile. He's a living witness to the fall of human civilization, the only person who experienced it as an adult with full context and understanding, who knew what was being lost, who could articulate the magnitude of the catastrophe. And he can't articulate any of it anymore because the witness has been erased and only the shell remains. Ice King lives in Simon's body like a hermit crab in someone else's shell. Using his power, living in his castle, surrounded by his treasures, but not understanding any of it. The Ice King doesn't know why he collects human artifacts, doesn't know why certain objects make him feel emotions he can't name, doesn't know that every princess he kidnaps is him acting out a distorted version of Simon's love for Betty, transformed by madness into something creepy and sad. Betty was everything to Simon, his partner, intellectual equal, the person who made his life make sense. They were planning a wedding, a future, growing old together, and when the Crown started taking him, Betty tried to help, tried to find a cure, tried to save him, but she was pulled into the future by magic, leaving Simon alone in the apocalypse with a crown he couldn't remove and a fiancée he'd lost to time. The Ice King's princess obsession is Simon's love for Betty filtered through dementia and magic. He kidnaps them because he's lonely, but doesn't remember why he's lonely, or what loneliness even means. He tries to marry them because marriage was important to Simon, but Ice King can't remember why. He builds elaborate scenarios and writes bad fan fiction, and creates ice sculptures that all revolve around the same basic plot. Ice King gets the girl. They live happily ever after. The end. Except it never ends that way. The princesses escape or Finn rescues them. Ice King is alone again. The cycle repeats. and somewhere in his broken brain, the same wound that's been bleeding for 1,000 years bleeds a little more. The loneliness deepens, the confusion multiplies, and he tries again because what else is there to do? The moments when Simon breaks through are devastating. They're rare, usually triggered by specific stimuli, Marceline's presence, certain songs, objects from his past. The crown's influence weakens for just a moment, and Simon surfaces like a drowning man gasping for air. And in those moments, he remembers, understands what he's become, sees clearly how much he's lost, and the pain is so intense, so overwhelming, that the crown's madness is almost a mercy when it crashes back down and drowns him again. Marceline is the thread connecting Ice King to Simon. She knew him before, during, after. She's watched the entire degradation play out across centuries, watched her father figure, the man who saved her life and sang her songs and tried to preserve humanity for her, slowly disappear into the crown's influence until there was nothing left but Ice King. A stranger who sometimes looks at her with Simon's eyes and doesn't know why she makes him sad. Their relationship is the show's most heartbreaking dynamic. Marceline wants Simon back, wants to save him the way he saved her, but she can't. The crown is too strong, the transformation too complete. She's lost him even though he's still alive, still right there, still capable of being saved if only she could find the right magic or spell or cure. But she can't. So she watches Ice King from a distance, helps him sometimes, gets annoyed with him because the Ice King is genuinely annoying, grieves for Simon while the Ice King uses his body to do stupid things. Ice King doesn't understand why Marceline is different, why he doesn't kidnap her, why he feels protective of her, why she can call him pathetic and he just accepts it. There's something in Simon's buried memories that recognizes her, protects her, loves her. But Ice King can't access it consciously, just acts on impulses he doesn't understand, leaves her alone, helps her when she asks, maintains their weird friendship without knowing they had a relationship before friendship, before he was Ice King, before the world ended. The crown is the perfect prison because Simon built it himself. Every time he used its power to save Marceline, he locked himself deeper inside it. Every ice blast that protected them from radiation, every freeze spell that made contaminated water drinkable, every storm he created to shield them from danger. All of it was Simon choosing Marceline's survival over his own identity, choosing love over self, and the crown rewarded that choice by taking more and more until there was nothing left to take. He's a ghost haunting his own body. The last human consciousness from the old world, preserved by magic, trapped by the very thing that kept him alive. Humanity's last witness, silenced by madness. The man who could explain everything about what was lost, rendered unable to explain anything. It's cosmic irony on a scale that would be funny if it wasn't so cruel. The Ice King's loneliness reflects humanity's extinction perfectly. He's the last of his kind, the last human from pre-war Earth who remembers what that Earth was like. Surrounded by new species who can't understand him, can't relate to his references or his memories, or the depth of what he's lost. He's a time traveller trapped in the wrong era. A refugee from a dead world trying to build connections in a world that has no context for who he used to be. Every time he kidnaps a princess, he's trying to recreate something. Connection, love, the feeling of being seen and known by another person. But he's going about it all wrong because the madness has corrupted his understanding of how relationships work. He thinks kidnapping is courting, thinks forcing someone to stay is the same as them choosing to stay, thinks he can manufacture love through ice magic and persistence, and every failure reinforces his loneliness, proves that he's fundamentally unlovable, that something about him is broken beyond repair. And he's right. Something is broken. But it's not Ice King, it's Simon. The human underneath is the broken part. The crown is just making it visible. Making it external, turning internal anguish into ice dungeons and princess kidnappings and penguin armies. Betty's eventual return and sacrifice adds another layer of tragedy. She comes back from the future, sees what's happened to Simon, spends years trying to save him, researches magic, makes deals with cosmic entities, sacrifices everything trying to reverse the crown's effects. And when she finally has the power to cure him, she uses it differently, becomes something else, fuses with a chaos god to save Simon from one threat, while condemning him to remain Ice King forever because the cure is gone and she's gone and he's stuck. She loved him so much she became something that can't love anymore. Turned herself into an abstract concept to save a man who's too mad to understand he's been saved. The ultimate expression of devotion resulting in mutual loss. Both of them gone. Both of them transformed into things that can't be together. Simon's tragedy becomes Betty's tragedy, becomes Golbetti's existence outside normal reality. Love eating itself in an attempt to preserve what it loves. Ice King doesn't remember Betty saved him, doesn't know she became a chaos god. Doesn't understand that the woman he's been searching for in every princess he kidnaps literally unmade herself trying to help him. He just knows he's lonely, just knows princesses are important somehow, just keeps trying to fill the void with royal captives who will never be enough because they're not Betty, and Betty is gone and Simon is gone, and there's just Ice King fumbling through existence without understanding why existence hurts. The other kingdoms treat Ice King like a nuisance, a joke. The weird old man who kidnaps princesses and gets defeated by a kid with a sword. They don't know he's a historical monument, the last remnant of pre-war humanity, a walking museum of everything that was lost. To them he's just Ice King, weird, pathetic, sometimes dangerous but mostly sad. They can't see Simon underneath because Simon isn't visible. The crown has painted over him so thoroughly that you'd need specialised tools to detect him, but he's still there, deep down, preserved by the same magic that destroyed him, sleeping, dreaming dreams he can't remember when he wakes. Sometimes those dreams surface as Ice King's strange behaviours, his hoarding, his desperate need for connection. His moments of unexpected kindness or wisdom that seem to come from nowhere. That's Simon, breaking through, trying to communicate from his prison, sending signals from the past that Ice King receives as nonsensical impulses. What does it feel like to be Simon, trapped in the Ice King? The show hints he's still conscious somewhere, still aware, watching his body do things he doesn't want to do, saying things he doesn't mean. Being pathetic and creepy and everything Simon Petrikov would have hated, and he can't stop it, can't control it, can't even communicate that he's still in there, still suffering, still desperately wanting someone to see him, to remember him, to know that Ice King isn't who he is, just who he's forced to be. The crown is a metaphor for dementia, for watching someone you love disappear into illness, for the cruelty of a body outliving a mind. Marceline experiences this, watches Simon fade across decades, watches him forget her name, forget their relationship, forget everything that made him Simon, until there's just reflexive affection without context. She's grieving someone who's still alive, still present, still capable of making her laugh sometimes, but fundamentally gone, and Simon is experiencing it from inside, feeling himself slip away, losing pieces, forgetting why things matter, watching his own decay from a perspective that's slowly losing the ability to understand decay. It's horror, pure existential horror, being erased while conscious, dying by degrees, transforming into something you'd hate while being powerless to stop it. The Ice King's life is a 1,000-year scream that nobody can hear because the crown turned the volume down to nothing. Just static. Just the muffled sound of someone trapped in ice, pounding on walls that are too thick to penetrate. And eventually even the person pounding forgets why they're pounding, forgets there's anything outside the ice, accepts the prisoner's reality, stops fighting. That's where Ice King is now, mostly resigned, occasionally confused about why he feels sad but not able to articulate the sadness or trace it to its source. Just existing, kidnapping princesses, playing drums poorly, hanging out with his penguins. Living a simple life built on the ruins of a complex one, and somewhere inside Simon Petrikov watches, helpless, forgotten, the last witness to humanity's fall, unable to testify. Unable to even remember what he witnessed, just knowing, in some deep, unreachable place, that something important was lost, and he's supposed to remember it, but the memory is locked behind ice that never melts. If you could talk to Simon right now, what would you tell him? That humanity's gone? That the world he knew is ruins? That Marceline survived and lived and became amazing? That Betty tried to save him? That his sacrifice mattered? Would any of it help? Or would it just be more information to get lost in the crown's static? More pain to be processed by a brain that can't process anymore? The living witness forgot what he witnessed. The museum curator became an exhibit. The man who studied the past became the past. And Ooo keeps spinning, building kingdoms on graves, telling jokes over bones, finding joy in radioactive soil. And somewhere in the ice, Simon sleeps. Dreams. Occasionally surfaces long enough to see sunlight before the crown drags him back down. Still alive, still preserved. Still the last human who remembers, still completely, utterly, heartbreakingly alone. Marceline was eating French fries when the world ended. She remembers this with the kind of crystalline clarity that trauma provides. Not the big things, not the bombs or the screaming or the fires, just the fries, hot, salty, the perfect kind of crispy where they're golden brown but not burnt. Her mum bought them from a restaurant that doesn't exist anymore in a city that doesn't exist anymore, and they were sitting together doing something completely normal, when normal stopped being a thing anyone could do. She was 8, maybe 9, old enough to understand that something was wrong, young enough that the full horror of what wrong meant couldn't quite land. The bombs fell and the world burned and everyone started dying, and Marceline's brain just couldn't process the scale of it. So it focused on small things, manageable things. The fries were good, Hambo was soft, Simon was there. Those were facts she could hold on to while everything else dissolved into chaos. Being a vampire probably saved her life. She'd already been turned before the war, half demon from her dad, quarter human from her mum, quarter something else nobody ever explained. And somewhere in her early childhood, she became a vampire. The show never specifies how or when exactly, but by the time the bombs fell, she was already drinking red. Already immortal. Already something that could survive when baseline humans couldn't. Which means Marceline is the only being in Ooo who experienced the fall of humanity as a human child, and lived to remember it across 1,000 years. She's the bridge, the connection point. Too young to fully understand what was lost, but old enough to carry the weight of losing it. Too human to fully belong to the new world, but too mutated to have ever belonged to the old one. Her memories of that time are fragmentary. Nightmare kaleidoscope. Images that don't quite connect into coherent narrative. Running through streets filled with ash. The sky turning colours that scared her more than the explosions. Her mum's face, worried. Trying to stay calm for her daughter's sake. And then her mum was gone. Just gone. No explanation. No goodbye. There one moment and absent the next. Probably dead in one of the waves of bombs or the radiation that followed. Probably vaporized or poisoned or crushed. Gone. And then Simon. Appearing like a wizard from her favourite stories, except real and wearing a crown that glowed with power, using magic to shield them from radiation, freezing contaminated water, creating barriers of ice between them and the chaos. He saved her. This strange man in a magic crown who'd lost his mind to save her life, who sang her songs about everything and nothing, who tried desperately to preserve pieces of humanity for her, even as those pieces slipped through his fingers like water. The years with Simon defined Marceline's entire emotional landscape. They wandered the wasteland together, father figure and daughter, who weren't related by blood but were bound by apocalypse. He taught her about the old world through stories, about movies and music and how people used to live, about love and friendship and all the things that mattered before survival became the only thing that mattered. He gave her context for what was lost, made her a witness to humanity's civilization, even though she'd barely experienced it before it fell. And she watched him disappear, slowly, day by day, the crown eating him alive from the inside out. Some days he was almost normal. Lucid Simon, telling her about Betty and his research and his old life. Other days the crown had him and he was distant, confused, speaking in word salad that didn't make sense, his eyes going white and cold, ice spreading from his hands without conscious control, the moments of clarity getting shorter, the episodes of madness getting longer. She was a child watching her only protector lose his mind. Knowing that he was leaving her even though he was still right there, feeling him slip away and being powerless to stop it, and the worst part was knowing why he was doing it. The crown was killing him to keep her alive. Every use of its power saved her and destroyed him. She was surviving at the cost of Simon's sanity, living because he was dying, and she was too young to process that guilt, too young to understand that it wasn't her fault, just old enough to feel responsible anyway. When he finally left, it broke something in her. He didn't abandon her, not really. He left to protect her from himself. The Crown's influence had gotten too strong. He was becoming dangerous, having episodes where he didn't recognize her, where he attacked without meaning to, so he left. Walked away into the frozen wasteland he was creating with his ice magic, left her alone with Hambo and the ruins and a lifetime of abandonment issues that would define her relationships for the next 1,000 years. Marceline survived alone, a teenage vampire in a radioactive wasteland. She learned to hunt mutated animals, learned which ruins had supplies worth scavenging, learned to avoid radiation hotspots and other survivors who'd gone feral. Learned that being a vampire meant you were always other, always separate, dangerous enough that people feared you, different enough that you could never fully belong. She adapted, survived, became hard in ways children shouldn't have to become hard. But she also held on to things, human things. She found a bass guitar in the ruins of a music store, taught herself to play, started writing songs about what she remembered, about fries and Simon and the world burning, about loss and loneliness and the specific kind of grief that comes from outliving everything you love. Music became her way of preserving the past, of keeping human culture alive when humans were dying out. Her songs are oral history, the only comprehensive cultural record of the apocalypse from someone who experienced it. She sings about, "I remember you and everything stays" and Fry Song, and each one is a time capsule, a piece of humanity preserved in bass lines and lyrics. When she plays, she's channeling Simon's stories, her mum's memory, the world that was. She's the last human musician, technically, even though she's not human, playing human instruments, singing in human language, preserving human emotional complexity in a world that's moved beyond it. And then she lived, just kept living. Decades became centuries. Centuries became millennia. She watched the ruins get reclaimed by nature, watched new species emerge, watched kingdoms rise, watched the Candy Kingdom get built in a crater, watched Ice King build his ice castle and start kidnapping princesses, watched everything transform from nightmare wasteland to magical adventureland. And she remained, constant, immortal. The last person who remembered Fries. The loneliness of immortality is hard to articulate. Everyone Marceline meets will die. Everyone she befriends will age while she stays young. Everyone she loves will leave her, either through death or just natural drift. She's learned this lesson repeatedly across 1,000 years. Made friends with survivors, watched them die. Made friends with their children, watched them die, made friends with mutants who had longer lifespans, watched them die. Eventually, you stop getting close, stop investing, because the pain of losing everyone gets worse each time and there's only so much grief one person can carry. But she kept her connections to the old world. Her house is furnished with pre-war items. Her bass guitar is vintage. Her clothes are scavenged from ruins and maintained carefully. She surrounds herself with human artifacts like Simon surrounded himself with them, except Marceline knows why, knows what they represent, keeps them as memorials, as connections to a species she was barely part of but can't let go of. Her relationship with Princess Bubblegum is the collision of old and new. PB is a product of the post-apocalyptic world, born from it, built by it. She has no memories of humanity, no connection to the old world except academic interest. She represents the future, progress. Moving beyond what humans were, and Marceline represents the past, memory, holding on to what was lost. They're drawn to each other because opposites attract, but they clash because their fundamental orientations toward time are incompatible. PB wants to build, create, optimize, make the new world better than the old one. Marceline wants to remember, preserve, honor what was lost. PB sees the ruins as resources to be used. Marceline sees them as graves to be respected. PB looks forward. Marceline looks back. And they love each other anyway because connection is hard to find when you're a 1,000-year-old vampire or a candy genius. And sometimes you take what you can get even when it's complicated. Their relationship works because they challenge each other. PB forces Marceline to engage with the present, to see value in the new kingdoms, to admit that maybe the world isn't worse now, just different. Marceline forces PB to acknowledge the cost of the new world, to recognise that she's building on graves, to remember that progress came at the price of billions of lives. They balance each other, ground each other, provide perspective that neither could achieve alone. But Marceline's grief never quite heals, can't heal, because she's still losing people, still watching everyone die while she continues. She befriends Finn and Jake and knows they'll die, loves PB and knows PB will probably outlive her by merit of candy person longevity, but even that's uncertain. Sees Ice King regularly and mourns Simon every single time. Her entire existence is structured around loss, present loss, past loss, future loss guaranteed by her immortality. The songs help. Music is how she processes, how she expresses what words can't capture. I'm Just Your Problem isn't about PB, not really. It's about being a problem because you carry too much history, too much trauma, too much pain from too many lifetimes. It's about being difficult because Easy died with the old world and all you have left is complicated grief and anger and love all tangled together in ways that make normal relationships impossible. Everything stays is her thesis statement, her philosophy of survival. Things change, transform, but something remains. The core persists even when the form doesn't. It's optimistic almost, hopeful, the idea that loss isn't complete, that something of what was loved stays, even after everything changes. It's how she copes with watching the world transform, by believing that humanity isn't completely gone. That pieces remain in her memory, in her songs, in the way Finn does heroism, in BMO's kindness, in the basic decency most of Oo's citizens display despite being candy and fire and lumps. But there's also rage, deep ancient rage at what was lost, at the Hyoomans who destroyed themselves, at Simon for leaving her, at her mum for dying, at the universe for making her immortal and forcing her to carry this weight forever. She channels it into music, into pranks that go too far, into pushing people away before they can leave her, into being difficult and prickly, and keeping everyone at arm's length because distance hurts less than intimacy when you know intimacy ends in grief. Marceline's perspective on the New Kingdoms is complicated. She sees their value, sees that PB's kingdom works better than most human governments, sees that Fire Kingdom conflict is healthier than nuclear war, sees that even lumpy spaces drama is preferable to apocalypse. The New World isn't worse. It's just different, and she's had 1,000 years to make peace with different. But she also sees what's missing, the complexity, the ambition, the drive to reach beyond what you are and become something more. Hyoomans were messy and dangerous and self-destructive, but they were also capable of incredible beauty, art and music and philosophy and love so deep it transcended death. The new species are simpler, safer, but they're also smaller in their dreams. They don't reach for the stars, don't ask the big questions, don't push boundaries the way Hyoomans did. She misses that, misses human messiness, the chaos and contradictions, the way Hyoomans could be horrible and wonderful simultaneously, could build museums to preserve the past while building weapons to destroy the future, could love deeply while hurting deeply, could create beauty from pain. The new species create beauty from innocence, and it's not the same. It's valid, but it's not the same. Sometimes Marceline wonders if she's the problem, if she's just old and stuck in the past and unable to adapt to the present, if her nostalgia for humanity is just the immortal equivalent of old people complaining about kids these days. Maybe the new world is better, and she's too damaged to see it, too invested in what was lost to appreciate what was gained, too busy mourning to celebrate. But then she plays her bass and sings about fries and remembers Simon smiling and thinks, no, the past deserves to be mourned, deserves to be remembered, even if it was flawed, even if it ended in nuclear fire. The people who died deserve someone who remembers they existed, who carries their culture forward, who refuses to let them disappear completely into archaeological footnotes. That's her role in Ooo. The keeper of memory, the last person who remembers what French fries tasted like, who knows that Simon was a person before he was Ice King, who can explain what movies were and why they mattered, who preserves human culture through music because if she doesn't, nobody will. The responsibility is crushing sometimes, being the sole repository of an entire species' cultural heritage. But she carries it anyway because someone has to. Her immortality is both curse and gift. Curse because she has to watch everyone die, has to carry grief that compounds across centuries, has to live with trauma that never heals because the wound keeps reopening. Gift because she gets to witness the new world emerge, gets to see beauty grow from ashes, gets to befriend Finn and PB and BMO and everyone else, gets to make music and have adventures and experience joy, even though joy is always tinged with the knowledge that it's temporary. She's adapted better than Simon did, better than most survivors did. She found ways to live that don't require forgetting, doesn't require the Crown's madness or the Hyoomans' isolation or the island Hyoomans' digital control. She just exists, plays music, makes friends. Pushes them away, lets them back in, cycles through relationships and adventures and emotional states while carrying her history like a backpack that gets heavier but never quite breaks her. The New Kingdoms don't really understand her. To them, she's just Marceline, cool vampire lady who plays bass and sometimes helps with stuff. They don't know she's a historical monument, don't know she carries the last living memories of human civilization, don't know that when she sings about remembering, she's literally remembering things none of them can even imagine. She's a museum docent giving tours to people who don't know they're in a museum. And maybe that's okay. Maybe she doesn't need them to understand. Maybe it's enough to just be, to exist in the present while carrying the past. To make new memories while honouring old ones, to be both witness and survivor, both human and vampire, both old and young, both connected to what was and invested in what is. Marceline chose to stay in Ooo, could have left, could have found some isolated corner of the world and lived alone with her memories, but she stayed, engaged with the New Kingdoms, made friends with candy people and fire people, dated a bubblegum princess, adopted a human kid and his dog as surrogate family, chose connection over isolation even though connection hurts, chose to participate in the new world even though the old one still haunts her. That's her real heroism, not surviving. Surviving was involuntary. The real heroism is choosing to keep living, keep caring, keep investing in people and kingdoms and a future she knows she'll outlive, choosing hope even when experience tells her hope ends in grief, choosing love even when love ends in loss, choosing to carry humanity's memory forward not as burden but as gift, as responsibility, as the last act of love for a species that died screaming. She's the bridge between worlds, between human and post-human, between old and new, between what was lost and what was found. And she stands there in the middle, playing bass, singing songs about fries and memory and everything staying even when everything changes. The last human who isn't human. The last witness who was too young to fully witness. The immortal child carrying humanity's eulogy in her guitar case. If the apocalypse had to have a chronicler, at least it got one who knows how to write a good hook. Would you want to remember the way she remembers? Or would forgetting be mercy? Finn spent most of his childhood thinking he was the only one, the only human, the last of his kind in a world full of candy people and fire people, and literally everything else people. And he was okay with that. More than okay. He had Jake, had Princess Bubblegum to have a crush on, had adventures to go on and monsters to fight and a treehouse to live in. Being the last human was just a fact about him. Like having blonde hair or being good with a sword. It was identity, sure, but it wasn't a problem, except it was always there, underneath. This quiet question of what being human even meant when there were no other humans to compare yourself to. When your only reference points for humanity were ancient artifacts you didn't understand and stories Jake told that were probably 50% made up. Finn knew he was human the way you know your blood type, factually, without really understanding what it meant beyond the basic definition. Jake raised him, a magical dog with stretchy powers and a laid-back philosophy about life, and Jake was the best dad a kid could ask for, human or otherwise. But Jake couldn't teach Finn how to be human because Jake wasn't human, couldn't explain human culture or human history or what humans were supposed to value. So Finn learned to be a hero instead, learned Jake's values, Oo's values, became a person shaped by the post-apocalyptic magical wasteland rather than by any human heritage. And that worked fine until he started meeting other humans, or things that used to be human, or things that were almost human but not quite. Susan Strong appeared first, led a tribe of people who looked human but wrong. The Hyoomans. They lived underground in the ruins of human bunkers, couldn't speak properly. Just grunted and used simple words and wore fish hats that might have been technology or might have been decoration or might have been both. Finn was so excited to find them. Other humans, people like him. Finally, he wouldn't be alone. Except they weren't like him. Not really. They were humans in the technical sense, had human DNA, human body plans. But they'd degraded, lost language and culture and everything that made humanity interesting beyond just the physical form. And some of them, including Susan, had cybernetic implants. Metal grafted into their heads. Technology merged with biology in ways that made the definition of human murky at best. Finn wanted to connect with them anyway, wanted to believe he'd found his people, but the Hyoomans couldn't be his people because they didn't have culture or language or shared understanding. They were survivors, descendants of humans who'd hidden from the apocalypse and paid for survival with everything that made them human except the meat. Finn had more in common with Jake than with these supposed humans. At least Jake could hold a conversation. Susan became his friend eventually, learned to speak, developed as a character beyond just grunting and hitting things. But she wasn't human in any meaningful cultural sense. She was post-human, a bridge species. Something that started as human but had evolved or devolved or been modified into something different. She represented what humanity became when it prioritized survival over everything else. Bodies without culture, DNA without heritage, the form persisting while the content died. And then Finn found his father, Martin Mertens, an actual human. Baseline, unmodified, fully human in every sense. And Finn had this fantasy built up. That his dad would be a hero, would be amazing, would explain everything about being human and welcome Finn with open arms, and they'd have this great relationship that filled all the holes in Finn's identity. That finding his dad would mean finding his humanity, understanding what he was, where he came from, what humans were supposed to be. Martin was a disappointment on every possible level. Selfish, cowardly, manipulative. He abandoned Finn as a baby, left him on a raft in the ocean to drift. Didn't care about him except as a tool to escape prison or con people or serve whatever scheme Martin was running. He was human, sure, completely human. But he embodied all of humanity's worst traits. The selfishness, the short-term thinking, the willingness to hurt others for personal gain. The casual cruelty wrapped in charm and jokes. Meeting Martin taught Finn that being human wasn't automatically good, that humans could be terrible, that maybe the apocalypse happened because humans like Martin existed and made terrible choices and refused to take responsibility, that humanity's extinction might not have been tragedy so much as consequence. Natural selection removing a species that couldn't stop being selfish long enough to survive. It broke something in Finn. This fantasy of human nobility, human exceptionalism. The idea that being human meant being heroic or special or good. Martin proved that humans were just people, could be good or bad, could be heroes or villains, could save the world or destroy it. And Finn, who'd spent his whole life trying to be a hero, had to confront the fact that his heroism didn't come from being human. It came from being raised by Jake, from choosing to be good despite what his species had done. The human islands were the next discovery, Finn's actual birthplace, a society of thousands of baseline humans who'd survived the apocalypse by isolating themselves, building a technological utopia far from Oo's magical chaos, preserving humanity in its purest form, and Finn went there expecting answers. Expecting to finally understand what being human meant, expecting to find home, and in a way, he did. The islands were home. His mother Minerva was there. Well, digital copies of her. She'd uploaded herself to the island's infrastructure to become an immortal caretaker, and she loved him. Desperately. Completely. With the overwhelming intensity of a mother who'd lost her child and gotten him back after years of grief. She wanted him to stay, to be safe, to let her protect him the way she couldn't when he was a baby. The island Hyoomans were everything humanity could have been if it had survived intact. They had technology, medicine, education, clean streets and safe environments and nobody trying to kill anyone. They'd solved the problems that destroyed mainland civilization. No war, no violence, no danger, just peaceful coexistence managed by AI systems and mandatory happiness protocols. But the cost was freedom. The islands ran on control. Mandatory genetic screening to prevent mutation. Surveillance everywhere. Emotional regulation technology that prevented people from feeling too much, or wanting too much, or questioning too much. Helper AI that managed every aspect of life. The humans there were safe and happy and completely controlled. They'd traded autonomy for security, wildness for domestication, the chaos that made humanity interesting for the stability that made humanity survivable. Minerva embodied this perfectly. She was brilliant, compassionate, dedicated to helping people, and she'd literally given up physical form to protect her citizens, uploaded her consciousness to maintain the island's systems. Heal the sick, manage the infrastructure, keep everyone safe in their digital physical hybrid society. She was the ultimate expression of human sacrifice, giving up everything to serve others, to protect, to love. But her love was suffocating, controlling. She wanted Finn to stay on the islands, to be safe, to let her keep him in this paradise prison where nothing bad could happen, but nothing interesting could happen either, where he'd be happy in the way the AI defined happiness, safe in the way total surveillance defined safety, human in the way genetic screening defined human. And Finn said no, chose to leave, chose Ooo over paradise, chose danger and adventure and Jake and PB and BMO over safety and his mother and thousands of other humans, because the islands weren't home, they were a museum, a preservation project, humanity pickled in digital amber, maintained but not living, surviving but not thriving, safe but not free. Finn realised something on the islands that changed his entire perspective. Being human wasn't about DNA, wasn't about living with other humans, wasn't about preserving some pure genetic lineage or cultural heritage. Being human was about choice, about agency, about the freedom to fail and grow and change and be messy. The island humans had optimized away everything that made humanity human. The struggle, the risk, the potential for both greatness and catastrophe. Ooo was more human than the human islands, because Ooo was messy, chaotic, dangerous, full of people making terrible decisions and learning from them, full of growth and change and evolution. The candy people and fire people and everyone else were living in ways the island humans couldn't. Taking risks, having adventures, making mistakes, growing. Finn belonged to Ooo, was shaped by it. His heroism came from Jake's teachings and PB's influence, and BMO's innocence and Marceline's music, and even Ice King's sadness. He was human by biology, but Ooo by culture. He represented what humanity could have become if it had survived the apocalypse and grown instead of hiding, if it had adapted instead of preserving, if it had embraced change instead of fighting it. His choice to return to Ooo was him choosing evolution over preservation, choosing to be human in the New World's terms rather than the Old World's terms, choosing to let humanity die as a pure species and live on as a hybrid. Human body, Ooo, values, the best of both worlds. And in making that choice, Finn became something the island humans could never be. A bridge, a connection between old and new, between human heritage and post-human future. He carried human DNA but Ooo culture, could understand both worlds, belong to neither, exist in the space between as something unique. His heroism proved that humanity's best qualities could survive without humanity. Courage, kindness, self-sacrifice, the drive to help others, the refusal to accept injustice, the willingness to fight for what's right even when fighting is dangerous. Finn did heroism the way humans used to do heroism, but in service of candy people and fire people and everyone else. He was human heroism in a post-human world, the concept surviving the species. Every adventure Finn went on was him proving humanity wasn't completely terrible, that the species that destroyed itself also produced people who would risk everything to save strangers, who would choose right over easy, who would grow and learn and become better versions of themselves. Martin might have been selfish, but Finn was selfless, and Finn was just as human as Martin. Which meant humanity contained both, potential for good and evil. and individuals got to choose which potential to actualize. The contrast between Finn and the island humans illuminated what was lost and gained in humanity's fall. The islands preserved the form but lost the spirit, kept humans alive but killed what made them interesting. Finn lost the form, grew up with dogs and candy people, but kept the spirit, the drive, the heroism, the human quality of constantly reaching beyond what you are. Island humans were safe. Finn was alive. There's a difference. Safety means nothing bad happens. Alive means everything happens, good and bad, and you navigate it and grow from it and become more than you were. The islands were a death in life. Finn was life in death. Humanity survived on the islands as preserved specimens. Humanity lived in Finn as active principle. His relationships proved this. He fell in love with Princess Bubblegum, made of candy, scientifically created, completely non-human. And their relationship worked because humanity wasn't about species compatibility. It was about connection, understanding, shared values. PB and Finn wanted the same things, to help people. Make the world better, protect the innocent. That made them compatible in ways biology never could. He fell for Flame Princess too, literally made of fire. Their relationship was complicated and messy and eventually didn't work, but not because of species difference, because they were young and figuring themselves out and made mistakes. Human mistakes, relationship mistakes, the kind any species makes when learning about love. The species difference was almost irrelevant compared to the universal challenge of understanding another person and being understood. His friendship with Jake was the foundation of everything. Jake wasn't human, wasn't even humanoid. Was a magical dog who could stretch and talk and give advice that was sometimes wisdom and sometimes nonsense. But Jake was Finn's brother, his dad. His best friend, the most important relationship in Finn's life, and it proved that humanity's need for connection transcended species. That family was choice and love and shared experience, not genetics. BMO adored Finn. A video game console with feelings seeing a human boy as friend and hero and player one. Their relationship was pure, innocent. BMO didn't care that Finn was human. Didn't even fully understand what human meant. Just knew Finn was friend, was family, was person who played games and went on adventures and made BMO feel loved. That was enough. Even Ice King connected with Finn eventually, saw him as friend, protégé. The son Ice King couldn't remember wanting, but Simon had always hoped for. Their relationship was weird and complicated and based partly on Ice King's delusions. But underneath was real affection, real connection. The last remnant of pre-war humanity reaching out to the last baseline human of the New World. Simon and Finn, separated by time and madness, still finding common ground in basic human decency. Finn's entire found family was non-human, and that family loved him more than Martin ever did, supported him better than the island humans could. Understood him deeper than the humans were capable of, because family isn't about shared DNA, it's about shared values, shared experiences, shared love. And Finn shared all of that with Ooo. His heroism was distinctly human in origin, but universal in application. Humans invented the concept of chosen heroism, of deciding to be good despite having the capacity for evil. Of fighting for others when fighting benefits you nothing. That's a human thing. Other species in Ooo are what they are. Candy people are simple. Fire people are aggressive. Lumps are lumpy. They don't choose their nature the way humans choose theirs. But Finn chose. Every day. Chose to be a hero when he could have been selfish like Martin. Chose to help when he could have ignored. Chose growth over stagnation. Chose the hard right over the easy wrong. That choice, that capacity for self-directed moral development, was humanity's greatest achievement. And Finn carried it forward into a world that didn't have humans to exemplify it anymore. He represented humanity's potential rather than its reality. What humans could have been if they'd made better choices, if they'd chosen cooperation over conflict, kindness over cruelty, long-term thinking over short-term gain, if they'd been more Finn and less Martin, more heroic and less selfish, more willing to sacrifice for others and less willing to sacrifice others for themselves. The islands showed what humanity chose: safety over freedom, control over chaos, preservation over evolution. They survived by becoming less. By optimizing away everything dangerous, including the danger of growth. They're alive but not living, present but not participating, human but not humane. Finn showed what humanity could have chosen: adventure over safety, growth over comfort, connection over isolation. He's thriving by becoming more, by taking risks and learning from them, by embracing the chaos and finding meaning in it. He's living and alive and becoming and growing and everything the island humans gave up to survive. And in choosing Ooo, in choosing to be the last human in a post-human world rather than one of many humans in a preservation project, Finn became humanity's real legacy. Not the DNA, not the artifacts, not the ruins or the bunkers or the careful genetic screening. The legacy is the choice to be good, the choice to help. The choice to keep growing no matter how scary growth is. He's the last human who matters, not because other humans don't exist, the islands have thousands, but because he's the last human living in the world humanity created and destroyed. The last human who has to navigate the consequences of human choices. The last human building relationships with the species that replaced humanity. The last human proving that humanity was worth something despite ending itself. When Finn does heroism, he's doing human heroism in a magical world. When he shows kindness, he's showing human kindness to non-human recipients. When he grows and changes and becomes better, he's demonstrating human capacity for growth. He's a living argument that humanity shouldn't be completely forgotten, that the species had value despite its failures, that something worth preserving existed in human nature beyond just the biological form. The islands preserve the form. Finn preserves the meaning, and between those two approaches the meaning matters more. Every adventure is Finn learning what humanity could have been. Every friendship is him building bridges humanity should have built. Every choice to help instead of harm is him rewriting humanity's story from catastrophe to redemption. He can't save humanity, it's too late for that. But he can give it a better ending than nuclear fire and extinction. He can make the last human matter, mean something, represent the best instead of the worst. And when Finn eventually dies, because he will die, he's baseline human without immortality tricks. What remains won't be DNA or artifacts. It'll be the example, the memory of a human who was heroic, who was kind, who chose right, who loved non-humans as family and was loved in return, who proved that humanity's extinction didn't mean humanity was worthless. That's a better legacy than any preservation project could achieve, better than museums or bunkers or carefully controlled island societies. Finn's legacy will be written in the hearts of everyone he helped, everyone he saved, everyone he befriended, candy people and fire people and vampires and ice kings and magical dogs, all of them remembering the last human, the good one, the hero. Humanity ended badly. But it ended with Finn, and that makes the ending a little better. Would you stay on the islands or return to Ooo? Safety or adventure? Preservation or growth? Here's the thing about civilizations. They rise, they peak, they fall, and then something else grows in the soil they fertilized with their failure. It's happened before humans. The dinosaurs had their run, dominated the planet for millions of years, then got deleted by a rock from space. Humans built on their fossils, literally used dinosaur remains as fuel to power the civilization that would eventually nuke itself into oblivion. And now candy people and fire people and lumps are building on human fossils. The cycle continues, the wheel turns. Nothing is permanent except the process of things becoming something else. Adventure Time understands this in its bones. The show is fundamentally about cycles, day and night, seasons, life and death, civilization and ruin. The Lich represents the end of all things, but he keeps getting defeated and imprisoned and defeated again, because endings aren't final. They're transitions. The apocalypse already happened, the world already ended, and then it kept going, started over, became something new. The end wasn't the end, it was a genre shift. The Great Mushroom War destroyed human civilization but created the Land of Ooo. The worst thing that ever happened to humanity was the best thing that ever happened to candy people, to fire people, to all the weird species that couldn't have existed without radiation and magic warping reality into new configurations. From humanity's perspective, it's tragedy. From Oo's perspective, it's origin story. Both perspectives are valid. Both are true simultaneously. That's the genius of how Adventure Time handles its apocalypse. It's not about whether the end of the world was good or bad. It's about what you do after, how you live in the ruins, whether you let the past define you or use it as foundation to build something new. The show answers these questions through Finn and Jake having adventures, through PB building her kingdom, through Marceline making music, through BMO playing games, through all of them choosing to live instead of just surviving. The lessons from humanity's failure are everywhere in Ooo if you look. The Candy Kingdom doesn't build weapons of mass destruction. The Fire Kingdom fights with honour and clear rules. Even the conflicts between kingdoms don't escalate to existential threats. It's like the new species looked at the crater where the Candy Kingdom sits and collectively decided that whatever drove humans to create that crater should be avoided at all costs. They learned from humanity's mistakes without having to be human themselves, inherited the lesson without the trauma of learning it firsthand. Princess Bubblegum is the clearest example of this learning. She's brilliant enough to build apocalypse weapons, has the scientific knowledge, has the resources. Could easily create candy-based bioweapons or magical nukes if she wanted. But she doesn't. She builds surveillance states instead. Benevolent dictatorships. Control systems that are problematic in their own ways but don't threaten total annihilation. She's chosen a different kind of wrong. A safer wrong. A wrong that doesn't end with mushroom clouds and extinction. That's progress, maybe. Not perfect. Not ideal. But better than nukes. Better than mutually assured destruction. The new kingdoms have conflicts and problems and injustices, but they're all survivable. Nobody's threatening to end the world. Nobody's building doomsday devices. The worst anyone does is kidnap princesses or start small wars or create candy zombies that get cleaned up by the next episode. Manageable problems. Problems you can fix with heroism and friendship instead of global cooperation that never materializes. Humanity's greatest achievement wasn't technology, or art, or landing on the moon. It was creating the conditions for something better to emerge from its ashes. The radiation and magic that killed billions also created the possibility for new kinds of consciousness, new forms of life, new ways of organizing society. Humans failed at being human, but their failure fertilized the ground for success at being something else. That sounds cold, like saying the Holocaust was worth it because it led to human rights declarations. But Adventure Time isn't making that argument. The show doesn't say humanity deserved to die or that the Mushroom War was good, actually. It says that life continues, that beauty can grow from tragedy, that hope is possible even after apocalypse, that the end of one thing is the beginning of another. It's not justification, it's observation about how existence works. The optimism isn't about the past, it's about the present, about Finn choosing heroism, about Jake being loyal, about BMO being innocent, about Marceline making art from pain, about Princess Bubblegum building kingdoms from craters, about Ice King getting moments of lucidity where Simon breaks through and remembers that kindness matters, about all of them choosing to make meaning in a world that has every reason to be meaningless. Because here's what Adventure Time really understands about apocalypse. It's not that the world ends. The world is always ending. Every day. Every moment. Entropy increases. Civilizations decline. People die. Everything you build will eventually crumble. That's physics. That's reality. The question isn't whether things end. It's what you do in the time between beginning and ending. Do you make it count? Do you create beauty? Do you help people? Do you have adventures? Finn and Jake have adventures. That's their response to living in a post-apocalyptic wasteland built on the graves of billions. They go on adventures. They help people. They fight monsters. They get into situations that are dangerous and stupid and wonderful. They make the ruins mean something by refusing to be defined by them, by treating the aftermath of humanity's greatest failure as playground, as opportunity, as the setting for a really good time with your best friend. That's either incredibly disrespectful or profoundly healthy, depending on your perspective. Probably both. Probably the show intends both. The ability to find joy in darkness, to make jokes about serious things, to treat tragedy with lightness, not because tragedy doesn't matter, but because if you don't find ways to laugh, the weight of it crushes you. Adventure Time's whimsy is coping mechanism. Its bright colours are defiance. Its jokes are survival strategy. The show treats the apocalypse the way you have to treat any overwhelming trauma. Acknowledge it. Respect it. But don't let it consume you. Don't let the worst thing that ever happened be the only thing that defines you. The Mushroom War happened. Can't change that. Can't undo it. Can't bring back the billions who died. But you can live anyway. Can build anyway. Can love and laugh and have adventures anyway. Because the alternative is despair. Is giving up. Is letting the bad guys win retroactively by refusing to find meaning in the aftermath. Finn's heroism is the antidote to despair. Every time he chooses to help someone, he's arguing that helping matters. That individual actions have value even in a world shaped by catastrophic collective failure. That you can't fix the past, but you can improve the present. That being good is worthwhile even when being good won't resurrect the dead or reverse the apocalypse. Heroism for its own sake, because it's right, because it makes the world slightly better, because someone should. The far future episodes confirm that the cycle continues beyond Ooo. Shermie and Beth, 1,000 years after Finn, living in a world even more transformed. The kingdoms have risen and fallen. New species have emerged. The Land of Ooo is now the land of something else. But adventure continues. Friendship continues. The basic pattern of finding meaning through connection and courage persists. Different forms, different names, same essential process. That's either comforting or terrifying. Your civilization will fall. Your species might go extinct. Everything you build will crumble. But the process continues. Life finds new forms. Consciousness persists in different substrates. Adventure happens regardless of which species is having it. You're not permanent. Your culture isn't permanent. But the dance continues. Someone else will dance it after you're gone. Different steps, different music, same fundamental rhythm. Adventure Time makes this feel hopeful instead of nihilistic. Shermie and Beth aren't living in Finn's shadow. They're having their own adventure, making their own meaning. They found the Finn sword, a literal piece of Finn's essence, and it becomes part of their story but doesn't define their story. The past informs the present, but doesn't control it. Legacy matters, but isn't destiny. They're free to be themselves while building on what came before. That's what healthy relationship with the past looks like. Acknowledge it. Learn from it. Use it as foundation. But don't be trapped by it. Don't let nostalgia prevent growth. Don't preserve the old world at the expense of the new one. The island Hyoomans chose preservation and got stagnation. Ooo chose transformation and got adventure. Between those options, adventure wins. Life over survival, growth over safety, becoming over being. The beauty of life continuing despite catastrophe is everywhere in the show. The grass growing through ruins, the candy people laughing in a crater, the fire burning eternal, the ice preserving memories, the lumps being lumpy regardless of apocalypse. Life adapts, persists, finds ways, refuses to be permanently defeated by temporary setbacks like nuclear war or species extinction. Temporary on geological timescales anyway. On human timescales, pretty permanent. But life thinks in deep time. Life has patience. Marceline embodies this patience. 1,000 years of existence. Watching civilizations rise. Watching them plateau. Watching them decline. And she's still here. Still making music. Still finding things worth caring about. Still connected despite every reason to disconnect. She could have given up centuries ago. Could have gone full nihilist. Could have decided nothing matters because everything ends. But she didn't. She kept playing bass, kept writing songs, kept caring about PB and Finn and everyone else, kept choosing meaning over meaninglessness. That's the real victory over apocalypse. Not preventing it. Too late for that. Not fixing it. Can't be fixed. The victory is continuing anyway. Making art anyway. Loving people anyway. Building kingdoms and having adventures and playing video games anyway. The Mushroom War tried to end everything, succeeded at ending humanity, but failed to end life, failed to end meaning, failed to end hope. Ooo is proof that apocalypse isn't final, that endings are just transitions, that the death of one world is the birth of another, and the new world is beautiful, genuinely beautiful, not despite the apocalypse, but because of it. The magic that makes Ooo weird and wonderful came from the same energy that destroyed human civilization. The radiation that killed billions also created candy people and fire people, and all the diversity of conscious experience now populating the planet. The tragedy and the beauty are inseparable. Same source, same event, different outcomes depending on perspective. That's uncomfortable. Means you can't cleanly separate good from bad. Can't say the Mushroom War was purely evil when it created the conditions for Princess Bubblegum to exist. Can't say humanity's extinction was purely tragic when it allowed new forms of consciousness to emerge. Can't make simple moral judgments about complex historical processes that have both catastrophic and creative outcomes. Have to sit with ambiguity, with contradiction, with the unsettling truth that terrible things can have beautiful consequences. Adventure Time sits with that ambiguity. Doesn't resolve it, doesn't need to resolve it, just presents it, shows you the ruins and the kingdoms built on them, shows you the tragedy and the comedy emerging from it, shows you Simon's suffering and Marceline's music and Finn's heroism and PB's achievements and BMO's innocence and Ice King's madness, shows you all of it together, connected, inseparable, complex. The show's treatment of apocalypse is comforting because it says you can survive the unsurvivable, can build meaning from meaninglessness, can find joy in ruins, can have adventures in wasteland, can make friends with candy and fire, can be heroic even when your species failed catastrophically at heroism, can be the last human and have that mean something positive instead of just tragic, can carry forward the best parts of what was lost while leaving behind the worst parts. Finn proves this every episode. He's human but not defined by humanity's failures. He's heroic, but not because humans were heroic. He's kind, but not because humans were kind. He's all these things because he chooses to be. Because Jake taught him. Because PB inspired him. Because BMO needs protecting. Because people need helping. Because it's right. His humanity is background. His choices are foreground. And his choices make him better than most humans ever were. That's the hope. That individuals can transcend their origins, can be better than their species, can learn from others' mistakes without having to make them yourself, can inherit broken world and still choose to be good, can look at crater and decide to plant candy instead of weapons, can find magic in radiation, can make family from friends, can have adventures in apocalypse. The Land of Ooo is apocalypse normalized, made mundane, integrated. It's not the setting for grimdark survival horror. It's the setting for whimsical adventures with emotional depth. The ruins are just landscape. The radiation is just background magic. The extinction is just history. The present is bright and colourful and full of possibilities. The past informs but doesn't control. The future is open. Anything can happen. Usually something weird and wonderful. BMO's existence is pure hope. A video game console with feelings, created by humans, adopted by post-humans, loved by everyone. Innocent despite everything, happy despite ruins. Making friends and having adventures and playing pretend. BMO doesn't know about the apocalypse, doesn't care about species extinction. Just knows that Finn and Jake are friends and adventures are fun and being alive is good. BMO's ignorance isn't weakness, it's freedom. Freedom from the weight of history, from the burden of knowing, from the trauma of remembering. Not everyone can be BMO. Marceline has to remember. Simon is trapped in memory he can't access. Finn has to learn his history eventually. But BMO shows that innocence is possible even in ruins. That you can exist in the aftermath without being defined by what came before. That sometimes not knowing is gift. That fresh starts are real. That the sins of the fathers don't have to be visited upon the sons, especially when the sons are video game consoles who weren't even around when the sins happened. The message about adaptability is clear. Humans couldn't adapt, built systems too rigid to survive disruption, created weapons too powerful to control, developed ideologies too inflexible to compromise, and died. The new species adapted, changed, transformed, became what they needed to be to survive in the new reality, embraced magic instead of fighting it, accepted mutation instead of fearing it, built simple kingdoms instead of complex empires, succeeded where humans failed because they were willing to be different, But adaptability without kindness is just survival. What makes Ooo special isn't just that life adapted, it's that life stayed kind, stayed innocent where possible, stayed hopeful, stayed willing to help strangers and befriend enemies and give second chances. The adaptation preserved the good parts of consciousness while jettisoning the destructive parts, kept love, kept friendship, kept heroism, kept art, lost nuclear weapons, lost existential dread, lost the capacity for species-level suicide. That's intelligent design by accident, evolution optimizing for consciousness that can survive itself. The species that made it through the Mushroom War were the ones too simple to build apocalypse weapons or too isolated to participate in the war. The aggressive ones, the ambitious ones, the ones with human-level complexity and human-level destructive capacity mostly died out. What remained was simpler, safer, kinder, better at being alive. Finn represents the synthesis, human complexity, kindness. The ability to understand deep problems combined with the wisdom to solve them through friendship and courage instead of violence and control. He's what humans could have been if they'd raised their children with Jake's values instead of Martin's, if they'd taught heroism instead of selfishness, if they'd prioritized community over individual gain, if they'd been better. The cycle will continue. Ooo will fall eventually. Shermie and Beth's world will fall. Whatever comes after that will fall. Civilizations always fall. But between the rises and falls, there's living. There's meaning-making. There's adventure. There's love and friendship and courage. There's BMO playing games and Marceline playing bass and Jake making bacon pancakes. There's all the small, beautiful moments that make existence worthwhile, even when existence is temporary. Adventure Time turns the end of the world into an adventure by refusing to let the end be final, by insisting that what comes after matters, that rebuilding is possible, that hope survives apocalypse, that candy kingdoms can grow in craters, that the last human can be a hero, that magic is real if you believe in it hard enough, that friendship and adventure and choosing good are enough. Are more than enough, are everything. The wheel turns, civilizations rise and fall, species emerge and go extinct, the planet keeps spinning, life keeps adapting. Consciousness keeps emerging in new forms, and somewhere, in some version of Ooo, someone is having an adventure. Someone is being heroic, someone is making music, someone is building kingdoms, someone is playing games, someone is laughing. The apocalypse happened, the world ended, and then it started again. Different, weird, magical, better in some ways, worse in others. But alive, still alive, always alive, life continuing, meaning persisting, hope surviving. That's not just Adventure Time's message, that's Adventure Time's reality. The show itself is proof. It took heavy themes like nuclear war and species extinction, and child abandonment and dementia and trauma and loss, and it made them into something beautiful, something weird and whimsical and emotionally resonant and ultimately hopeful. It turned apocalypse into adventure, turned ruins into playground, turned the death of humanity into the birth of Ooo. And if a cartoon can do that, maybe we can too. Maybe when our world ends, something grows from it. Maybe our failures fertilize someone else's success. Maybe the cycle continues and that's okay. Maybe endings aren't final. Maybe hope survives everything. Maybe adventure is always possible. Maybe candy kingdoms grow in every crater if you wait long enough. The Land of Ooo is a love letter to resilience, to adaptation, to hope, to the unstoppable force of life-finding ways, to consciousness refusing to stay dead, to meaning emerging from chaos, to joy possible in ruins, to friendship stronger than apocalypse, to adventure never-ending. Come along with me, the future is ours to see. Everything stays but it still changes. The wheel turns but the dance continues. Civilizations fall but life persists. Humans died but heroism survived. And somewhere, right now, a boy and his dog are having an adventure in the ruins of the old world while building the new one. That's mathematical.